creaky horse-drawn carriage rumbled through the ancient forest of Salads, carrying its nervous passengers straight toward the far-off Grandel Kingdom. With her eyes blazing and a hopeful smile on her face, the young woman talked about calling heroes from another world, people with wild powers strong enough to crush the Demon Lord's army. And then she leaned in, wondering if their fight had finally worked. Now standing up, the young woman told the two seated men that the summoning happened a whole month ago. Then she leaned in and asked if those ancient hero legends were real. A regal queen leaned forward and welcomed the summoned heroes from another world with a smile, praising their brutal power that didn't match the realm's usual magic or fighting style. She was certain they'd crush the Demon Lord fast and finally end this never-ending war. With a hopeful look in her eyes, she asked if they'd lend their strength to a safer world. While the young woman from earlier watched it all, her focus locked on the heroes. Akai's Minato stood before the queen with his eyes blazing wide, half thrilled, half stunned. Because the moment she said his power could be tested inside his own mind, he started wondering if his cheat ability was something truly monstrous. Akai's Minato froze in shock when a status screen snapped into existence. His name, 17, and the job title Hero from Another World right there for everyone to see. Then it hit him, his so-called designated skill was just convenience store, while the young woman with a book in hand grinned as she verified his abilities. Akai's Minato, now dressed for the real world, stood in the middle of a roaring city street, squinting into the blinding sun as his mind raced back to his old life as a normal 17-year-old high schooler, Akai's Minato, right up until he got ripped into this new world. The Grandel Kingdom's magnificent walled city sprawled across the horizon, and Akai's monodome marked the truth. About a month had slipped by since he and the others were dragged into this strange new world. Akai's Minato locked onto a building stamped with the number 24, looking exactly like a convenience store, and the truth hit him again. This other world's Demon Lord still hasn't been beaten, and since the hero got summoned, nothing has really changed. He even reminded himself that he and the others were dragged here from another world too. He slumped at the table, dead-eyed and completely bored when a voice cut in. Hey, Minato-kun. And yeah, that's exactly how the summoned heroes were stuck right now, according to the chronicler. Tamaki Sayuri, the vice captain, snagged his attention the second she held up a tiny item and grilled him about why his convenience store skill was so limited. She demanded to know why there were no clothes or fashion magazines, and the other female heroes chimed in, craving their weekly reads, while Akai could only fume and try to explain. Until Tamaki pressed harder, questioning what he thought a convenience store could even be, and his mind snapped back to the fact that all he had was salmon on a gyraien. He tried to defend himself, saying his convenience store just didn't carry anything like that, only salmon on a gyoza bun and bottled tea. Yet Tamaki stayed livid and grilled him about how the convenience store skill could even level up, while Akai, crushed with guilt, begged them to be patient. Even when the other guy brushed him off, he knew his convenience store power wasn't useless at all, because it could run a fully working shop with a real toilet paper, electricity, lights, and even air conditioning, and he could fire off unlimited orders from the back office too. For someone from the modern world, that's basically divine, but deep down, he still felt something was off. While he chewed, he kept drilling into his mind how his skills could blow up, watching the other heroes chow down on the modern stuff. Little by little, he figured out that if he shared the convenience store's treasures with the people here, they'd trade back with rare local ingredients and even fresh fruits. For now, it looked like he was safe, his survival locked in. Just then, two more summoned heroes rolled in, grinning like they owned the place. Kawasaki Ryo, the hero of wireless communication, declared himself and practically buzzed with excitement to live the Third Army life all over again. And right behind him came Katsuragi Shinji, the tailor hero, who didn't even pretend. He flat-out admitted he was there mainly to use Akai's toilet again. Katsuragi teased Akai over that toilet comment, and Tamaki, teetering on pure annoyance, snapped that the vice captain was sprawled out on the floor, fast asleep. Akai could only let out a weary sigh, clocking the wild but comfy chaos and thinking, yeah, that's how it all ran back then. Suddenly, everything snapped. 1 minute they should have been in class, and the next they were staring at a towering, unfamiliar grand hall, while the queen, calm, regal, and perfectly poised, welcomed the heroes from another world like it was always meant to happen. She faced them head-on and demanded, will you lend your power to save my world? Then she snapped, I'm Crucius, the queen of the Grandel Kingdom in the east, and poised to lay bare the nightmare closing in. The queen kept talking, and with every sentence she spilled the truth about the Demon Lord, a nightmare, boss-level monster that shouldn't exist. His creatures were tearing the world apart, And on the great continent, 2 of the 7 nations were already wiped out by his non-stop attacks. Attacks, a grand kingdom, trapped in utter catastrophe, kicked off an ancient ritual that tore a hole to another world. Because that's exactly what summoned the heroes. Fourth, she pushed on with her speech, saying all 30 kids from class 2 through 3 had been summoned, way more than the legends ever promised, and the whole land spiraled into worry over this shocking turn. Then a blonde student, speaking for them, stepped up and asked what caused their summoning and whether they could ever get back. He pushed even harder, demanding to know whether they could go back to their original world if they refused to fight the demon lord, hanging his whole hope on the idea that their wish might actually be granted. She swallowed her regret and told them the hard truth. No, they couldn't make their wish to go back immediately happen. Tamaki Sayuri and a fellow male student both froze in shock. Then she laid it out. This was the only road back to their world. Defeat the demon lord, drain a massive stash of his magic, and only after that could they trigger the ancient reverse summoning to force their way home. Minato's Akai hung on every word, feeling how terrifying this really was, while the blonde student blinked, swallowed the hard truth, and steadied herself to hear everything else. Yet fresh dread suddenly spread across the summit. The blonde student cut in with raw doubts, asking how normal people like them, who weren't even warriors of this world, could ever stand a chance against a demon lord this terrifying. The queen didn't let panic linger. She moved fast to calm them and promised there was nothing to fear. She admitted the truth. Ancient legends claimed the heroes, dragged in from other worlds, could do things this world's people never learned. And those killer abilities still haunted bedtime tales of past heroes who'd crushed demon lords. Her words lit a spark in the students. Then Akai's Minato heard special abilities, and without thinking ran a mental skill check to test what he could really do. And when the result hit, he blurted out that it was an insanely cool power. But the second his excitement hit, it crashed into pure dismay. Because his skill turned out to be nothing more than a convenience store power, a boring little trick with zero combat hype or epic adventure. And all he could do was grieve that he didn't get a real cheat-level ability, like a life with beautiful elves, fluffy beastkin, and charming fairies. Even though it crushed him the moment the next day hit, the summoned heroes were dragged into formal training at the royal palace, starting with the brutal first step, choosing their anti-demon lord abilities. Minato watched the blonde committee member, Kuramachiyu, lay it all out with deadly confidence. Then he said you were blessed by the goddess. So every one of his skills hit max from the start and basic magic couldn't touch him. Plus he could cheat death and come back up to 5 times as an immortal. And Minato just stood there like, what kind of monster-level cheat is this guy? The shock didn't stop. New summoned heroes kept crashing onto the scene, each one packing terrifying skill sets including Kanai Morijin, a water demon sorcerer, Kanai Mika, a healer who could turn the tide in seconds, Seri Rudy Lyria, a sniper legend archer, and Yukishina Shirori, a sword master built to cut through anything. A never-ending line of heavy hitters surged forward. Natori Miyuki, sealing barriers like a pro, Minazuki Yohei, whipping his spear with deadly skill, Kirishima Masaki, freezing the air with ice magic, and Tamaki Ayaki, slipping in like a shadow as she showed off her assassin's stealth. As the introductions wrapped up, Tamaki Sayuri stood shoulder to shoulder with Kawasaki Ryo and Katsuragi Shinji and laid it all out. She and Ryo were filling in for injured members of the Second Army, while Shinji was with the Third Army, a unit most people treat like it's outside the real fight. The whole vibe snapped into full-on conflict mode when Sugiyama Yuki, a fire sorcerer, swaggered in and announced he'd snagged an elite spot, then revealed that, after a month of brutal training, the Third Army would storm the front lines. Tamaki Sayuri chimed in that the First and Second Armies were already grinding through tough training, while Minato fumed hard over his dumb convenience store power. Kawasaki Ryo and Katsuragi Shinji didn't catch a thing, too busy buzzing as they looked forward to Minato's store finally showing up right where they were. Later alone, he slumped in silence with a hand pressed to his head, his face weighed down by crushing doubt, and he couldn't stop asking how he could ever beat the demon lord with something that looked so painfully ordinary. His eyes went wide with worry, and you could see the storm inside him as he kept hunting for an answer to the mess he was trapped in. Ridiculous, then bam, a voice snapped through the air and he jerked back in panic as Tamaki Seri stepped in, demanding to know what was wrong with him. Wrong, he snapped out his frustration, admitting his convenience store skill felt totally useless next to everyone else's monsters. But Tamaki cut in fast, saying, "Wait, your power actually saves lives," bragging about air conditioning and flush toilets like they're pure comfort. Then she warned, "If you slack off, they'll all be furious, and not every summoned hero is willing to square up to the demon lord with their whole heart. Minato stared at her, stunned to learn not every hero was itching for a fight. Then Tamaki laid it out. If they couldn't beat the demon lord, they'd be stuck here forever, trapped in a nightmare no one wanted. She flashed a soft smile and told him, "You're the hero of the convenience store. You've got the power to keep us safe." Minato froze, his brain catching up as a shy blush crept up his cheeks. He stumbled into the quiet convenience store alone. Every last summoned hero finally scattered. And with the clock ticking toward closing, he weighed the idea of flipping the sign and opening up for real. Just then, Minazuki Yohei and Kanai Morijin burst in. Minazuki immediately snapped into concern, pointing out that Akai skipped training that day, while Kanai grilled him on why he was there, his tone cutting like a blade. He shot off a quick apology and insisted the convenience store was actually perfect for body conditioning. But Minazuki wasn't buying it. His eyes kept snagging on how violently Kanai was coming at Akai. Kanai brushed the convenience store off as total trash, the kind of dump the Third Army would use, and Kirishima Masaki and Sugiyama Yuki piled on, laughing at Akai's skill to his face. That taunting hit a raw nerve in Kanai, and he couldn't just swallow it and move on. Without a warning, Kanai ripped a brutal burst of water through the air and nailed Minazuki Yohei, who'd been hovering protectively near Akai, leaving Akai reeling, stunned, and gasping for breath. Minazuki got yanked under by the raging current, screaming in agony as Kanai exposed his water demon sorcerer, furious that his comrade, Akai, had been attacked, while Akai roared at her to stop. Kanai just smirked and kept hammering Minazuki with relentless water blasts, jeering that he was a slug while sneering that both him and Akai were trash from some other world. Meanwhile, Minazuki fought like crazy, gasping and straining against the crushing current. Kuramachi Yu finally stepped in and in a calm voice told Kanai to stop her attack, straight up reminding her that Akai still had to hear the important info, then urging them to settle their fight outside. Kanai snapped with annoyance, but she reluctantly backed down. Akai, choking through wet coughs, struggled up inch by inch, eyes locked on Minazuki, who was sprawled on the slick floor, completely dazed. Kuramachi Yu flashed a grin and said it's been a whole month since they last met. And yeah, Akai is still clocking the same sadistic, get-drenched hobby. Akai fumed, glaring right back. Kuramachi Yu stood right in front of him and launched into a warning about single-minded people, and the Akais. He was still shaken from the last fight, so all he could spit out was a confused, helpless sound. Kuramachi kept going, his voice steady but steel hard, pressing Akai to say what he truly wanted. Then he bluntly warned that Akai's shadow alone was enough to keep the weakest ones from facing the brutal truth of what they were living through. The blonde-haired man then snapped a brutal order. Akai had to get out of the city, explaining that he'd brushed off the bumbling Third Army at first. But Akai's convenience store skills pushed the right people into running, and now the whole situation had spiraled into something he couldn't tolerate. Crushed by the accusations and the brutal weight of Kuramachi's words, Akai buckled to his knees, head hanging low in raw defeat and despair. Kuramachi stared down at the kneeling Akai and snapped that, sure, his power wasn't totally worthless, but right now he was nothing but an irritation to them. Then he dropped the real bombshell. If they wanted to get back to their original world, the summoned heroes had to take on the Demon Lord, and that meant everyone had to team up. He got the big picture instantly, then asked for a second to let it all sink in. Even though he understood, frustration flared as he snapped that it was totally unreasonable to leave him stranded alone in a world with no land. Yet the blonde man only gave a small apology and said they could just wait until morning. The blonde man then pitched a deal, kneel and I'll hand over travel money. The dark-haired woman lost it and burst into laughter, while the dark-haired man just stared, stunned out of his mind. He kept going, promising they'd crush the Demon Lord and rise as the chosen hero, and he told the dark-haired guy to just chill. This fate was already locked in. Still, the dark-haired man snapped back, questioning the whole idea that the future could be confirmed. The blonde man then boldly declared he could already see what's coming, him striking down the Demon Lord and saving the modern world with his own hands. While the dark-haired guy just stared, utterly lost, letting out a baffled sound. As the blonde man's whole vibe flipped, a chilling, menacing aura swallowed the air around him, talking about reshaping the world, grabbing power, and even becoming an undead blessed by the goddess, demanding whether the dark-haired man got his noble dream. But the dark-haired man saw right through the act and realized the blonde bastard was trying to drain the very essence of this world completely. Yeah, you know the blonde's real nature, so the dark-haired man decided he couldn't stay another day and packed up to get out of this town, while the blonde-haired guy just grinned like he already knew it would happen and told him, "Go on. Good luck defeating the demon lord somewhere out there in the world." Moments later, the dark-haired man burst into a convenience store, praising it like it was the perfect place for full recovery, while the dark-haired woman snapped with rage, demanding to know if he was actually serious, grilling him for showing up here after he'd been told to go straight to the demon lord's castle, calling his move totally unreasonable and insisting she was giving him direct orders. Then the light-haired man with glasses jumped in, asking if the dark-haired man was even one of the chosen ones. Again. She pushed him harder, demanding to know if he had zero say in this mess, and he just stayed calm, saying the current selection team didn't mind the temperature swings, as if they'd learned to tolerate different approaches. Still, she pressed on, asking if that was really the truth, and her face stayed full of worry. She kept talking about the hero training program, and you could tell the committee chairman, this blonde guy, was absolutely fired up, while the other heavy hitters rolled in too. An ice mage, a boundary mage, and a sword master, each bringing their own deadly specialty to the table. Still, she leaned toward her dark-haired companion and groaned that all that early hype fizzled. Only 5 people, her included, were actually taking the Demon Lord training seriously, while the rest were slacking hard, especially the ones cozying up in the royal palace. Yeah, everyone started that classroom lesson like they meant it, until the second practical monster subjugation training kicked off, and the vibe split fast. The air turned hotter for some, colder for others, and that giant muscular guy came at it with pure, reckless intensity. Meanwhile, the ice mage, white spiky hair and all, had gone berserk in a past training session, turning a warrior into nothing but an ice sculpture, so brutal that even the dark-haired man blinked in shock. And she didn't hold back either, admitting she hated his cruel, drawn-out way of beating enemies. Then the dark-haired man snapped his gaze to the blonde committee chairman and demanded the truth about the psychopath's real nature, while the chairman just smiled calmly and said he was a model, diligent student who never missed a single task, someone the royal palace trusted deeply. She shot down the chairman's verdict, and his words made her skin crawl. Then she dropped a bombshell. After training, while everyone else scattered back to their homes, the chairman slipped into a bedroom on the lowest floor of the royal castle, and her dark-haired companion gasped in stunned disbelief. Her confession barely left her lips when a terrifying vision hit. Blonde-haired chairman, right there in that same bedroom, tangled up in an intimate embrace with a gorgeous woman in a nightgown. Rage instantly exploded in her chest. She screamed that he was a pervert, swore she'd never forgive him, and her dark-haired companion just stared, completely thrown off. The dark-haired man reeled as the bombshell hit, a grim truth snapping into place. The blonde chairman was the queen's lover, practically a shoo-in to become the next king. And that meant this chairman wasn't just important. He was sitting on real power, real influence. He kept wrestling with what it all really meant, because if they botched the chairman, their own position could get shattered in an instant, and it all clicked. This wasn't just some simple plan. He felt the chairman had something bigger in motion, a scheme that didn't stop even after the demon lord was gone, and that truth left him and his female companion unsettled to the bone. Hours later, when dawn finally closed in, the dark-haired man was still there with his arms crossed, unable to get a wink of sleep, because it hit him hard. The psychopath, the chairman, had probably already grabbed a huge chunk of power, and now he had to face the terrifying truth of what they were really up against. He crashed into sleep, still thinking about Tamaki, who was curled up right beside him. He almost smiled at her understanding, but then the smarter part of him kicked in, warning him it was better not to go head-on with that blonde-haired man if he wanted any chance at a future. Suddenly, the comm got ripped apart. Multiple arrows smashed through the window and slammed into the room, and he jolted awake with his eyes going wide, realizing they weren't just any arrows, they were fire arrows. He snapped awake Tamaki with a frantic shout. She jerked up, eyes wide with terror, then froze when she saw the flaming arrows, gasping as she demanded, "What's happening?" Chaos erupted, so he lunged for the nearest computer and said he'd check the outside world through the surveillance cameras, while Tamaki, still totally stunned, kept firing questions at the chaos unfolding in front of them. Surveillance footage showed a terrifying scene, an entire squad of armed soldiers bearing down, led by a ruthless figure, and when he and Tamaki spotted the leader, their hearts sank. It was Crucius, the queen's knight, and he couldn't hide his dread as he realized the queen's forces had come for. He figured Crucius must have gotten direct orders to throw him out, judging by how massive the whole operation was, and he couldn't shake the feeling they wanted this huge spectacle to serve as a warning to everyone. While Tamaki, her face tight with worry, demanded to know why they needed to flex that kind of force at all. Crucius, now exposed as Queen Grandel herself, boomed at the convenience store hero, declaring that the church had stamped him as a demon-linked hero, so he was banished from the kingdom forever. The queen kept raining down a brutal list of charges on him: murder, rape, extortion, and more, saying his crimes just wouldn't run out, and when he heard it, shock hit him hard as he blurted furious denials, calling it all outrageous, while Tamaki, just as shaken, insisted this was cruelty pushed way too far, but the queen swatted their protests aside, admitting she looked the other way until now and then snapping that she couldn't take his wild, outrageous behavior anymore. Mounted on her horse, the queen barked the order again: "Surrender, then vanish from the kingdom, you hero of that convenience store," and her warning cut like steel: "Disobey, and they'll burn you at the stake." Sensing the danger right away, he grabbed Tamaki's attention and barked that she had to get out of there, use the back exit, and run for her life, while Tamaki, still stunned, stared back at him in pure confusion. He roared that she had to break free, he'd just surrender instead. But she snapped back, refusing to leave him behind, warning that his shadow would only drag her into danger. And when he fought back, he swore he wouldn't accept some pathetic end. Her heart ripped open with emotion as she swore she'd never let him go, no matter what. He tried to calm her down, telling her they'd meet again and that, when she came back, he'd even make her rice balls. And the shock on her face said it all. She never expected him to be that kind. She was still rattled, staring at the evidence, and then it hit her: the real reason he'd been showing up at that convenience store every single day. He pushed her again, and with a steady, unshakable voice, told her it was time to go. As she finally spun to walk away, tears poured down her cheeks, and she snapped that he was an idiot. He just flashed a calm, reassuring smile, telling her to pray for him as he set out to defeat the demon lord and to stay safe. He stared as she vanished into the thick forest, her final wave sealing her promise: she wouldn't die. His eyes turned ice cold, and a bead of sweat slid down his temple as he stared down what was coming. He burst into the open courtyard, threw his hands up in surrender, and let the queen's forces close in, forcing him to submit. They surged in on him with spears and swords leveled, and he forced himself to stay perfectly compliant. Soon they yanked him into restraints and shoved him to his knees, while Queen Grandel, sitting high on her steed, loomed over him with pure contempt, declaring they'd never see each other again and dubbing him the incompetent convenience store hero. He snapped his gaze back to that towering castle, the queen's words crashing through his head as he grappled with the crushing label of incompetent hero. The solitist forest sprawled for miles under a suffocating darkness, like the light itself refused to show up. So dim it felt unnatural, while the air clung to damp earth and the constant promise of something dangerous lurking unseen. He ended up deep in the solitist forest, cursing the fact that if he could have bolted back to town, he would have done it. Because if anyone caught him, they'd burn him as an eternal exile. He even thought about how his grandmother's house sounded better than this nightmare, terrified he might be the first dropout in this state. Suddenly, a beacon of civilization burst through the thick foliage, an everyday convenience store. He froze, eyes bulging with shock and hope, staring at that familiar building like it was a miracle glowing in the middle of a wild, untamed forest. His relief barely had time to breathe before a guttural growl ripped through the shadows, and three monstrous, wolf-like beasts lunged out of the forest, eyes blazing with pure predatory hunger, all caught on the store's surveillance cameras. He recoiled hard, his face twisting into pure terror as he saw something horrifying barreling straight toward him fast. Inside the convenience store, he scanned everything in a heartbeat, squinting at how blindingly bright it all was, then snapped that this place was way too obvious, and the lights had to die right now before he darted toward the electrical switch. To his horror, there wasn't a single light switch in sight. He gasped like he'd hit a dead end, realizing a 24-hour place probably never needed one in the first place, and then panic set in as he clung to the desperate hope that it might react to sound. Rage burning in his chest at the missing light switch, he shoved whatever he could into the office doorway and barricaded it tight. Any wall, even a janky one, had to beat doing nothing against the invasion closing in. Then the truth hit him hard. He was exiled, left for dead, and now the attack was finally here. Right as he started setting everything up, those monstrous wolves smashed through the front doors, dark shapes against the night, bursting into the bright store, their predatory eyes hunting the glowing aisles. He stared at the creatures on the surveillance screen, and every silent, sneaky move made his stomach drop. Because these weren't just wild dogs or wolves, they were real monsters. Panicked, he shoved aside fear and poured out food from the whole store, praying they chow down and vanish. As he said it all out, his hand bumped a tiny, dark orb that glowed. He choked on a gasp as the truth hit him. Those monstrous wolves had already smashed into the convenience store and were staring him down. Without hesitation, the creatures exploded forward, their shapes streaking with predatory speed, and it made him jerk back in pure shock and panic. Swearing at his bad luck, he frantically tore his eyes across the area, hunting for anything he could use as a weapon, and then he spotted a fire extinguisher. With pure desperation driving him, he snatched it up and readied it to blast the oncoming beasts back. He blasted the monsters with the foam from the extinguisher, and for a heartbeat they recoiled behind a roaring white cloud. Then the canister died fast, and he got exposed all over again. He swore through clenched teeth as the truth hit him. This wasn't a battle anymore. His life was dangling by a thread. A sharp, almost hysterical laugh burst out of him as he clutched the extinguisher, now totally useless, while the sheer absurdity of it all crushed him. He collapsed to the floor, still chuckling, when the brutal truth finally sank in. He'd been tossed into another world with a cheat ability, and yet he was just a lowly mob character, seconds away from getting torn apart by monsters, while wolves snarled outside like they couldn't wait. Beaten to the bone, he slumped amid the broken wreckage, and that mysterious glowing orb from before lay ignored at his feet. His eyes slid down, and his mind snapped back to his parents, wondering if their hearts would start to worry. Then he couldn't stop imagining it. Would Tamaki, with her dark hair and that gentle smile, break down in tears when she found out he'd died alone in a place this desolate? Place, he realized he'd only remembered her right before his death was about to hit. He scanned the security monitors, and there were no monstrous wolves in sight, just a creepy quiet that made him wonder if they'd finally backed off for good. He scanned the wrecked convenience store, and the moment he realized the monsters were truly gone, relief hit him hard. Then a weird warmth sparked in his hand, a faint glow blooming from his palm. Paul, right in the middle of everything, heard a chime slam into his mind, and his whole body jolted. A system message blinked into view, screaming that the convenience store hero had just leveled up. He froze, eyes wide, trying to understand how on earth that voice knew, because none of this was supposed to be real. He scratched his head, and a small grin crept in as everything clicked. Then a status screen popped into view, showing his name, age, and his fresh title. Hero of the convenience store, level 2 ***, complete with his skills, stats, and everything from strength and stamina to agility, magic, and luck, confirming he had no acquired magic or skills yet, but now, somehow, he really had the title. He staggered into the store, blindsided by the non-stop flood of new info, and the shock of realizing his powers had just turned on full blast, so he crumpled to the floor, gasping. He knew he had to test what those fresh functions could do, and the system even told him his store got an upgrade. The item level and durability level both jumped to 2. Then the inventory started changing. Tuna mayo on a gyri, menteco on a gyri, BLT sandwiches, cola, and delicious water all got added. And just like that, sturdier gear rolled in too. A fire extinguisher, a fire alarm, a sprinkler head, and a fire shutter. He sprawled on the floor with his eyes shut, trying to process everything that just shattered his world. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a horse whinnied with pure panic, tossing its head back like it couldn't breathe. A lone horse strained in a team, yanking a wagon down a pitch-black forest path, while inside the carriage a distressed woman looked back in panic. 2 men beside them, one clutching a scythe and the other stomping along in heavy boots, escorted the carriage deeper into the woods. A sudden, piercing scream ripped through the night, and the dark-haired man snapped his head up, eyes blazing with panic, because what fresh disaster had just exploded. For a split second he thought, Grandel's knights must be chasing someone asterisk, but he shut that idea down fast. A straight-up showdown was way too obvious for how they usually operated. He spun his focus to the monitor in front of him, eyes narrowed as he wrestled with the truth. If this wasn't a straight pursuit, then what was it? The surveillance cameras were just out of range, so he had no visual proof to go on. His eyes narrowed, a fierce spark locking in no matter what happened, because he knew one thing for sure. He had to investigate this himself. Moments later, he slipped into the cover of the trees and stared at the wreckage. An overturned carriage, total chaos, and his gut screamed that bandits had hit it. As he watched, the grim truth hit like a punch. Hooded assassins surged in and started smashing the carriage's occupants. One man sprawled and bleeding out, already beyond saving, while another attacker lifted his blade, ready to land the final strike and end him. The dark-haired man jerked back in pure horror at the attack's brutal violence, clamping a hand over his mouth as a silent gasp burst out. Because the assassins were still right there, watching. He knew he had to bolt before they clocked him, but one of the hooded figures snapped out, their voice cutting like a blade. The assassin's scream shattered his worst fears. Somehow she'd slipped away. His eyes snapped to the chaos, and there she was, a young blonde woman with hair flying, scrambling through the underbrush, eyes blazing with terror. Then it hit him she wasn't just a bystander, she was a survivor. He shot forward to shield her, yanking her into his arms as the assassins bore down on them, and with a grim, vow-like stare, he vowed, without a single word, that he'd defend her no matter what. As the blonde woman begged for help, the dark-haired man spat out curses, because he knew plain and simple his powers weren't enough to beat the assassins. While he fought his dread, the hooded figures huddled and traded plans, one of them even pushing the idea of taking her alive instead of killing her, like they had something even darker in mind. Even with fear crashing through his chest, his eyes snapped into steel, ready to move forward no matter how brutal the odds were. He clenched his jaw and stared like steel because he wouldn't, leave her behind, not when he was the one who'd come from another world. World spun as he let out a desperate cry, reaching for the startled blonde woman, pushing her to move, because behind them 2 hooded assassins were closing in fast, and their threat chilled the air. He yanked the woman forward as she tripped and slammed to the ground, shouting at her to follow as he took off. Then they tore through the doorway of what looked like a convenience store and scrambled inside for cover. Meanwhile, one assassin outside snapped a crossbow into place, lined it up on their legs, and barked for his partner to stop freezing. Inside the shop, he stared down at the trembling woman, and for one brief second, calm settled in, enough time to think they might actually be safe. But that uneasy doubt just wouldn't leave, and he kept weighing their next move. His thoughts got steamrolled as the outside assault wouldn't let up. Now 3 assassins slammed into the glass, their eyes locked on one goal, breaking in. Later, he crashed into a chair in front of a computer, brow locked in frustrated knots. Just yesterday, he had survived a monster attack, and still he felt totally outmatched, while the blonde woman stood nearby, watching in silence. His eyes snapped wide open, and the realization hit him in a single, electrifying flash. He snapped his gaze to the woman, and there she stood, calm as ever, her delicate face and long blonde hair pulling his attention in like a spell. And suddenly he blushed, wondering whether she was an elf or just human. Either way, she was impossible not to find cute. Outside, the assassins kept hammering forward. One of them slammed a weapon into the building's outer wall, and the impact sent debris exploding outward as rubble rained down. He locked eyes on the computer screen, and the truth hit him like a punch. Yesterday's low-level fire shutter wouldn't stand a chance against their relentless pursuers. She stared at him, worry gnawing at her face, while he ranted about how weak he believed he was. Then he wished he'd been a real powerhouse hero, so he could have saved her with way more style. The regret hit hard. He whipped his head toward her, clamped a steady grip on her, and told her, "Listen close." Because when the attackers finally shoved their way in, he'd draw every eye to him, and she had to bolt the second that opening hit. Even with danger closing in, he flashed a fearless grin and told her, "You're safe, everything's going to be okay," swearing he'd protect her no matter what came next. She met his eyes, shock sparking in her wide gaze. Right as he finished talking, the convenience store's glass front blew inward, and a pack of hooded assassins stormed through, demanding to know where their target was, screaming for the brat to show himself. Inside, the assassins snapped their heads around and clocked every detail. Then one of them stared at the building's brutal sturdiness and murmured, "What kind of structure is this?" Suddenly, a blade of steel screamed through the air. Then a knife slammed into the wall inches from his head. He jerked back, eyes wide, as the blonde woman gasped in pure terror. He snatched a fire extinguisher in a flash, ready to hit back the same way he did yesterday, and he snapped at her to take this second. "Escape through the door right now, go." Right then, little did they know, an assassin lurked outside, watching every move through a hidden camera as their escape attempt unraveled. He muttered a curse under his breath, fury flashing across his face as the truth hit him. They'd been watched from the outside. He weighed their trouble and realized that if he lunged at the assassin himself, the people inside the store would be left wide open. So he checked the back exit, only to see the enemy outside ready to stop anyone who tried to slip away. Right as he weighed his options, the assassin outside smashed the glass and vowed he'd kill them. So he threw himself between danger and the blonde woman, swearing that there wasn't a second to plan anything. Then it hit him hard and fast, like a bolt of lightning. He flashed back to his days in Grandel, where the weirdest stuff like fire alarms actually existed. And once he remembered how he'd used a fire extinguisher, a thought slammed into place. Maybe that fire alarm worked the same way. He slammed the alarm into action, and the ceiling sprinklers blasted to life, soaking the assassins who had just busted into the store, soaked and stunned as they blurted, "Is this sorcery?" He just needed the other lookouts to hear the chaos, and then his plan could finally click into place. That deafening alarm, though it was meant to save them, snapped the monstrous wolves straight to attention, the same nightmares that had attacked the night before, and they stormed the drenched assassins in a violent rush, ripping them apart with brutal fury, and he finally understood. The fire alarm's roar had lured the beast. With chaos roaring louder by the second, he slammed the fire alarm off in a blink. Then the remaining assassins, crushed by the monstrous onslaught, were ordered to fall back and leave their wounded comrades behind. But the terror wasn't finished. One monstrous wolf locked onto the blonde woman, then lunged hard, and he threw himself in front of her on pure instinct, slamming her into safety while the beast crashed toward him. The hit slammed him down hard onto the slick, wet floor, and for a split second the shock left him completely dazed. As the screams and clashing steel outside finally died down, the blonde woman dropped to her knees beside him, brushing his head with a tender touch, trying to soothe him after that brutal nightmare. He carefully kept a firm grip on the blonde woman, telling her the attackers were gone, and pushing her to tell him if she was okay. When she stared up at him with eyes stretched wide, fear and shock crashing together, he clocked how messy she looked, and a blush shot straight across his face. Embarrassment hit him like lightning as he realized just how close they were, and he couldn't stop thinking. How long had he been holding a girl this cute? She admitted she'd been so desperate and scared that she never even registered how near they'd gotten. He tried to talk himself down, reminding his heart that he'd just saved her life and that this tight embrace was only because the emergency demanded it. Yet he was still shaking with embarrassment, so he pressed his worry again and asked, one more time, if she was really okay. Suddenly she broke down in tears, face twisted with pure panic as she confessed just how terrified she'd been, shocking him with that sudden outburst. He pulled her into a gentle hug, soothed her with a tender pat on the head, and confessed that the whole ordeal had left him choking up too. Outside the convenience store, that fire alarm kept screaming like a banshee, flashing a brutal warning that they had to get the building fixed fast, or more monstrous creatures would come crawling in on the noise. He kept her in his arms, refusing to let go until her shaking finally stopped, giving her the space and time she needed to breathe through what happened. Right as he held her close, a wild system notification popped up, telling him the convenience store hero had leveled up. Then he froze, stared at the timing in pure disbelief, and checked his new status. His convenience store skill and durability had jumped, and a bunch of fresh items were unlocked. Between his brand new powers, he spotted something totally weird, an unlock for a convenience store light switch, and it left him completely baffled. He stared in total disbelief, voice cracking with exasperation, as he demanded to know why a simple light switch was only showing up at level 3. Why the most basic thing in his abilities wasn't there from the start. Next to him, the blonde woman watched with wide-eyed surprise and uneasy dread, muttering about how ridiculous it was that this convenience store nonsense had to be the reason. Then a system message flashed in, confirming his gear was finally complete. Like that meant he could breathe easier now. Tina, all flowing blonde hair, swung an arm through the sun-splashed forest and told them Cadena was west. While beside her, the dark, spiky-haired Quino kept pace, fingers laced with hers, and figured they'd hit the town in just a few days. Tina fired off heartfelt thanks to Aquino for pulling her out of danger, then introduced herself, Tina Ulnish, and admitted she was 16. Aquino blinked in shock because she was just 1 year younger than him, and her face screamed kid more than threat. But then it clicked. She was the merchant's daughter, running a trading business in Cadena. Tina spilled the whole nightmare. She'd been hauling cargo to the Grandel Kingdom when bandits smashed in. And in the chaos, every one of her attendants and companions was ripped away the moment the attack hit. After they laid the fallen to rest, Tina grabbed Aquino's hands and thanked him again for saving the day. But he brushed it off at once, telling her he'd only done what had to be done. Tina blurted out whether he was some legendary sorcerer, amazed by what he could do, and he instantly snapped back that he was no famous mage at all, just a regular person. Then introduced himself as Kino Kanata, a hero from another world, and Tina's eyes went huge as she gasped in shock. With her eyes still blazing in disbelief, Tina shoved closer to him, demanding to know if he really was that legendary hero from another world. While Aquino snapped his gaze away, sweat beading on his temple, visibly choking under the crushing weight of that name. Later, Tina sank into a mountain of books in the library, eyes locked in as she devoured every page. Because here, almost nobody had to be told what a hero from another world was. Page after page and story after story piled up, all about how those past heroes had slaughtered demon lords and pulled the world back from the brink long ago. Aquino let out a shaky chuckle, because the idea of being compared to legends like King Arthur or Yamato Takeru, names that would sound even bigger back home, felt way too grand, and he still wasn't done. Tina gripped her hands in sheer dread and pressed Aquino hard. If this legendary hero from another world ever got unmasked, would they really exile him, or wipe him out completely? Then she grilled Aquino, asking if he knew how to escape the forest. Because she'd been through it for trade so many times, she could practically map the paths in her sleep, and she offered to lead him straight to her hometown as the fastest way out if he didn't mind. He stared at her stunned, like, "Wait, is that even okay?" And then she just grinned bright as a sunrise and solidly confirmed, "Yes, I mean it." Even though Aquino started out shocked, he somehow found himself nodding along to her guidance, and he just kept it replaying in his head. And just like that, their journey kept roaring forward, side by side through the forest, trading meals, sneaking in quick bursts of exercise, and pushing onward step by step. As they strolled, she tracked the sun's position and the shadows' twist, guiding their steps like it was obvious, while he kept his face covered, groaning inward about how close she stayed, and asking himself why girls in this world were so boldly affectionate. He went bright red with worry, firing off questions. Was she okay? Was she sick? Because she wouldn't let go, clinging to him like a lifeline. She snapped her gaze up, shocked by his concern, and only breathed out his name again, and in that same heartbeat he knew they had to bolt out of the forest fast before more monsters or bandits came hunting. She told him the monsters of this world usually hunt after dark, but then admitted that only a few monsters, level powerhouses, can actually strike even under the sun. After that, he grilled her about the black wolves specifically. She steadied him and promised they'd keep their guard up against bandits, just like they did the other day, and he nodded along, knowing the threat didn't ever really let up. Then he cut the conversation sideways, firing off about Cadna and whether the Grand L Kingdom had its hands on it, because he made it crystal clear he wanted nothing to do with anything tied to that realm. She made it crystal clear. Cadna wasn't tied to any kingdom at all. It was an independent merchant city, and everyone knew it as one of the richest trade hubs on the entire continent. She gushed that the journey was thrilling, loving how the city buzzed with life, but Aquino admitted, straight up, that he didn't feel confident he could fit into a place that loud and vibrant. Tina pushed the crew deeper into the dense forest, sure this brutal 10-day trek on foot would finally spit them out in Cadna, and they wouldn't stop. Day after day, they kept marching forward. As night crashed down, they scrambled for cover in a tiny abandoned building, one Aquino instantly clocked as the perfect little store from his world, so monsters and thieves wouldn't get them, while an owl nearby perched and watched every move. While serving, Tina, delighted, blurted that the BLT and milk tea Aquino brought were insanely delicious, and her eyes lit up like fireworks, while Aquino just stood there, a little flustered as he watched her beam. While Tina finally caught her breath, Aquino slumped at his desk, eyes burning as he stared into the mess of the world. Because the war against the Demon Lord had been screaming on for more than 100 years, and right now, it was marching through its 103rd year since that first battle. Battle-s over, and Kina, now on her feet, rushed out the truth. Cruz wasn't exaggerating about the world's breaking point, because it's been this bad for centuries. She said the long war with the Demon Lord crushed humanity and pushed them back, while the Demon Lord's territory kept swallowing more ground. And back then, Kina had thought the hero summoning program would finally fix everything. She kept going, shoved a map into his hands, and explained that every desperate king had started hero summoning rituals to save them. Yet for a whole 100 years, none of those nations had ever managed to summon a single hero. Tina then leaned in and dropped the bombshell. 300 years ago, the Grand Dale Kingdom summoned a hero, and the proof still survived. With shining, hopeful eyes, she stared at Aquino and told him everyone's betting the future on him to beat the Demon Lord. Aquino didn't meet her gaze. He accepted her truth, but his voice admitted the scary part. He wasn't sure he could carry that weight. Hina wouldn't back down. She insisted Aquino really was a hero, reminding him he'd saved her life. And with a bright smile, she crowned him the strongest, kindest, most thoughtful, truly magnificent hero. Aquino clenched his fist and admitted to himself, yeah, he really was a hero from another world, but he couldn't forget his past. The royal capital cast him out for being worthless, and even his status panel still humiliatingly labeled him an unnamed hero. He offered his thanks, and a thin sheen of sweat raced down his brow as he weighed how much truth he could hand her right now, and he knew he couldn't give her everything yet. As he weighed his choices, Tina, always so thoughtful, asked what he planned once they hit the city, then offered him a warm, heartfelt invite to stay at her place, swearing her father, a man who actually respects heroes, would welcome him with open arms. Even with his doubts, Tina's sincere eyes locked onto his, and she wouldn't let him slip away, insisting she still had a whole stack of things she wanted to hear from him, desperate to learn every detail of his story. Her sincerity hit him hard, and he finally admitted he knew nothing about this world, so he nodded and agreed to lean on her for a while. Tina's face lit up, beaming like she'd just been handed the perfect chance to help him. With a brand new resolve burning in his chest, he stared at his situation and realized one thing. He couldn't stay locked away anymore. He had to reach for the outside world, and in his head a whole lineup of creations started forming, modern conveniences flashing through his mind like a moth-eaten scroll. With purpose reigniting in his chest, he declared he was fired up and laser-focused, then shoved Tina to hurry, pushing them to make tracks for Cadna. She agreed instantly, pure excitement bursting off her. Before long, their journey snapped them right into their destination. Tina threw her arms wide and pointed at the massive settlement, beaming as she proclaimed they'd finally reached Cadna, her hometown, while Akina stared in stunned, wide-eyed disbelief. He stared up at the colossal fortifications, and the sheer size of the city walls hit him like a tidal wave, pure awe. Inside the city, the crowd was massive. Aquino swore it felt like a giant convention, buzzing and packed, and he couldn't help wondering if the deeper parts would be even more wild. Weaved through the crowd, Tina couldn't help herself. She leaned in, curious about his comparison, and asked if a comic was basically a festival back home, because the energy felt just as wild. Then she lit up and said she wanted to check out the other spots he mentioned too, Akihabara and Ikebukuro, while Aquino stood there looking totally overwhelmed. He shut down those dreamy ideas of their future at once, refusing to buy into the whole Tina and me will conquer the demon lord and live happily ever after fantasy. And he didn't stop there either. The thought of going back to his world, just so Tina can chase after him, felt so ridiculous it made him scoff. He wondered if his thoughts had slipped out of his mouth when Tina stared at him, curious, a little worried, and asked straight up if he'd said anything. Still gripping his hand, she lit up with pure joy in Cadna, telling him with trembling honesty that his presence in her life meant a debt so massive she'd never be able to repay it, even in 100 lifetimes. She kept going, swearing she'd live for him forever, begging him to keep trusting her, while he felt his gut twist with panic, because that sweet angelic grin was already turning him into a Corwin, the kind of guy who gets easily pulled in by a heroine, and he couldn't shake the fear that he was seconds away from falling for her. Blushing and sputtering, he shot down the idea fast, insisting nothing big happened. Tina should be the one grateful because without her, he would have been totally swallowed up in the fourth. Forstina clung to his arm and practically glowed as she bragged about how happy she was to be useful to him, pushing him to lean on her nonstop from that point onward, while he could only squeeze out an awkward, strained laugh. As they pushed through the roaring city streets, he spotted a checkpoint up ahead, armored soldiers standing guard, and he knew it was finally their turn to slip through. He couldn't shake the doubt. Was it really okay to just stride on through, or was that move way too careless? Tina, glancing back at him, listened like she was clocking every word. He couldn't stop spiraling. Tina's dad sounded like a heavyweight, and Tina herself felt like some untouchable princess, making him wonder if this kind of twist was normal for a romantic comedy. Then Tina cut in and said, "With my citizen ID, anyone who comes with me slips right through no problem." Even as a hero, he couldn't stop cursing his own convenience store skills, watching the line shuffle along. Then it hit him. Does everyone in Cadna, like Tina, carry a citizen ID too? Right there, another person dangled a pendant-like tag as proof. He stayed posted at the city gate, watching a guard lay down the rule. Citizens could only carry their ID inside the walls, no exceptions. And at this northern checkpoint, they didn't even have the setup to check credentials in the first place. As they pushed deeper through the loud, bustling streets, he leaned in and demanded to know about the outer district. Tina told him it sat south of the city walls, and that folks from there flooded into Castle Town for work before heading back home once their shift was done. Then he pressed harder, cornering her with one burning question. What exactly did it mean to be an outer district worker? She leaned in and explained it plain. Past the southern castle walls stretched the outer district, packed with laborers who lived there without any citizen rights, and that's when his eyes went wide, because the city was way, way bigger than he'd ever imagined. He finally admitted Cadna was way bigger than he'd ever pictured, like he might get hopelessly lost in it. Then Tina just beamed and said she'd guide him straight to her house. With a shy blush lighting her cheeks, she practically begged to bring him to her father ASAP, and when he watched her, a spark of surprise flashed across his face. As they pushed through a roaring market street, she suddenly whipped her finger forward and shouted, "That's Kanata-sama!" and he froze, utterly dumbfounded. Moments later, they came to a jaw-dropping, gold-and-engraved mansion as the massive gates swung wide and the whole grand facade loomed before them. Tina beamed and claimed it was her home, while he just froze, staring in total shock, one incredulous word slipping out of his mouth. Panic fluttered in his chest as it hit him. Tina really was a remarkable lady, and suddenly he couldn't stop wondering if she expected him to marry her. Still clutching his hand, Tina asked whether he was worried her father would lose his temper since he came from another world. Then her gaze snapped away, and she shouted, "Father!" What? Tina sprinted up and wrapped her arms around a distinguished older man with glasses and a mustache, and when he saw she was safe, his relief hit hard. Then he just watched the reunion, a quiet worry settling in, because deep down he didn't feel great about how he'd wiped out those bandits. Tina's father blurted out his thanks, thanking him for saving her from danger, while Tina's eyes brimmed with tears as she apologized for worrying everyone. Then she proudly introduced him as her savior, and he, all flustered, rubbed the back of his head. He suddenly found himself face to face with Adonis, Tina's father, who bowed so deeply it looked like the room might shake, pouring out heartfelt thanks for saving his daughter Aquino. And Aquino, stunned, immediately tried to wave the praise away. Adonis spoke straight to Tina, and his voice trembled with raw relief and pure disbelief, as he demanded to know if she was really alive. Aquino watched the reunion unfold. Relief washed across his face in a small, warm smile, and he breathed. Thank goodness Tina made it back to her father safely. Adonis snapped the moment his mood turned. He swung a fan at Tina, rage twisting his face into a vicious scowl, then tore into her, demanding to know what she'd been doing after he'd lost such valuable property from the carriage, and slammed the verdict down. She wasn't getting home until she made up the lost profits, calling her a fool to her face. Kino burst forward to stop the cruelty on the spot, but Adonis snapped him back, saying this was an unwish family matter and that an outsider like him had no business interfering. Fear gripped them as Adonis snapped at Tina, grilling her about whether she even understood what her father said. Then he whipped his gaze to Aquino and sneered, demanding to know who that filthy man was. Tina's eyes went wide with pure panic as she begged her father to stop, saying Aquino had already thrown his life on the line for her, and that he would save the entire world, because he mattered more than anyone could ever imagine. Adonis scoffed at her words and snapped the truth in half. Aquino really was a hero, dragged in from another world. But 2 weeks ago he'd been labeled the most useless of the bunch, kicked out of the kingdom, and his fate was reported to nearby nations. Aquino froze, a jolt ripping through him as he finally understood his real status had been exposed. Right there, humiliating him in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Adonis kept ranting, claiming he'd heard rumors about Aquino's string of crimes across the kingdom, and that being linked to him would only stain his family's name. Her father's iron grip wouldn't let go. She shrieked in pure misery as he raged, shaming her for idleness and ordering her to do her duties, saying she had no shame at all. No. She snapped, hand clawing toward Aquino, and when he shot his arm out, his eyes went wide in panic as he shouted her name. Aquino stared out at the sprawling outer district, the exact opposite of those tight inner walls, like a rough, law-bent slum that barely held its shape, and right beside him, Tina, Tamaki, and Adonis watched the same view. Then he spun to face Adonis and shot out a heartfelt apology for what he'd done to Tina, admitting he'd always sensed their separation would be coming sooner or later. Adonis just kept his cool and accepted it. Aquino stared at the chaos and realized it had all taken a wild turn, like he'd only dragged trouble onto Tina's doorstep. Then he stopped short and asked Adonis if he could ask a question. Adonis laid it all out, his years-long dream to open a business in the city, but only inside the inner walled zones, while Aquino nodded along, clearly getting it, yet still holding on to some secret idea. Adonis kept going, and he revealed that in the outer district, residents and businesses were allowed to operate with way more freedom than anywhere else. Aquino stared at the towering outer wall and instantly clocked the rule all new arrivals had to follow. Stay outside the shelter, and you'd be left wide open to attacks. No defenses in sight. Yet something in his head clicked, like this could be a weakness he might actually turn into an advantage. He sucked in a deep breath, let it out slow, and sealed his decision like a promise. Just moments later, Aquino stepped up in front of a brand-new modern convenience store, its sign proudly flashing **24**, and with a grin so wide it practically split his face, he swore this was the start of his otherworld convenience store life, while the townspeople watched in stunned silence, confused looks and all. Tina, Tamaki, and Adonis, along with everyone else watching, froze in sudden shock and total confusion as Aquino lunged into his unexpected move. Aquino didn't let their shock slow him down. He waved wide and proud at his brand new shop, inviting everyone to step in, buy the rare and bizarre treasures he'd stocked, and promised them a truly one-of-a-kind experience. His blonde male companion and his dark-haired female companion froze in stunned silence, eyes bulging with disbelief at the sudden burst of a shiny new modern building. And all around them, the outer district townspeople started whispering and staring, just as baffled as if reality itself had tilted. World, as the initial shock started to fade, he blurted out that he was finally done hiding and planned to jump right in with the townspeople, a complete 180 from his usual reserved self. Then confidence hit him hard, convinced his store's goods were exactly what this new venture needed. The dark-haired woman, still trying to catch up, could only gasp and ask what kind of place this was really turning out to be. With a grin on his face, he boasted that this was a convenience store, packed with rare foods and all kinds of otherworld goodies. And with a warm, sweeping gesture, he practically urged them to come closer and grab whatever made their eyes light up. The blonde guy, curious as hell about this from somewhere else idea, grabbed the sealed package and demanded to know if it really came from another world. Then he didn't overthink it, bought it, and shoved it into Aquino's hands. Aquino lit up with pure joy. His very first customer picked a BLT, and he flashed the blonde guy a big compliment, praising his sharp taste and hammering home that nailing a killer first impression mattered for his brand new store. Then he shoved the bagged item into the blonde guy's hands, and the moment he grabbed it, confusion flickered across his face like he had no clue what he was holding, while the dark-haired girl studied the whole handoff with a sharp, thoughtful stare. Suddenly, realization hit Aquino like a lightning bolt, and he realized he'd forgotten something absolutely critical. Panic hit him hard when it dawned on him he'd never set a single price for any of his goods. Back in Grandel, he'd lived on a steady allowance, so buying anything was never his problem. Here he'd been told there were 4 kinds of currency: gold, silver, copper, and iron. But he had zero clue what any of them were worth or how to price his stuff at all. The blonde man just stared on, completely thrown off by Aquino's sudden meltdown. With a strained, desperate grin, Aquino blurted out that every single thing in his shop would cost just 1 copper coin. Then the blonde guy and the dark-haired girl froze, staring at him like they'd just witnessed the impossible, caught between pure shock and total disbelief. The second the price hit the air, the townspeople who'd been staring in curiosity snapped into a frenzy, swarming forward in a wild wave of eager customers and crashing into Aquino and his crew, as they pushed and shoved, begging to grab items at that ridiculously low price. He let out a stunned cry, eyes bulging with disbelief as the chaos crashed all around him. Outside the convenience store, locked in by the sharp 24 on its wall, the place stood like a bright beacon in the whole neighborhood. He sprawled on the floor, totally crushed, while Tina tore into him with the truth about this world's money. 1 gold is 10 silver, 1 silver is 10 copper, and 1 copper equals 10 iron. Then it hit him hard. He'd been hawking everything for the same as 10 yen, and it was laughably cheap. Then it hit him, Tina's words, and he cursed himself for not asking about the world's currency sooner, because now he couldn't stop worrying if she was okay or if he'd ever see her again. A month had already slipped by since that convenience store first opened, and he'd finally gotten used to the brutal grind, working through it all day, even picking up a few of the simple local characters along the way. The shop finally had strict hours now, shut down twice a day to restock and place orders, and customers got only 5 items max, plus a big sign screaming that the toilet wasn't for public use. And yeah, he figured the locals might not totally get it, especially with that whole 24 thing sitting there. Sign, he thought about it, how the outer district folks had slowly opened up, thanking him and backing him at every turn, until that warm, steady feeling of belonging hit him hard, like he'd finally found where he truly fit in this new world. He stopped in his tracks, clutching a bottled drink, and stared at his own hand, letting a rare moment of calm cut through the chaos around him. Suddenly, a tall, muscular man barreled into the store with a warm grin, Zerl, and announced he was here for the usual haul, slapping 2 big bags of the previous day's earnings down on the counter, while making it clear that Aquino was still raking in steady profit. He rolled in from the west, Zerl, a spice-scented merchant with bags of goods in tow. And when he heard about Aquino's success, he couldn't help but stare in envy, especially since it had only been about a week since that convenience store first opened. As Aquino pushed himself up and clutched his sign, Zerl slid into his brake like trouble on a timer, claiming he needed to talk. Yet Aquino couldn't shake the feeling that the guy's whole vibe was suspicious. Aquino frowned in confusion and pressed zero, demanding to know how he was running the daily sales, and what he really meant when he said exchange. The merchant grinned like he'd cracked a secret and said, "Since every single thing here costs just 1 copper coin, Aquino must be raking in copper non-stop every day." Then he scoffed like, "But keeping all that money stashed, doesn't that turn into a real headache?" Then he offered to swap those copper coins for gold, promise free of charge, only to wink like he knew exactly what he was doing and tack on a sneaky 0.5% exchange fee from the total, daring Aquino to say it was a bad deal. Aquino exhaled in frustration and admitted Zurl was right. The mountain of copper coins really was a problem, even if doubt still gnawed at him as he weighed the offer. He finally caved and agreed to the deal. Because compared to getting robbed, this felt safer, and Aquino pointed out their business bond never died, since Zerl still kept getting his rice ball. Then Zerl tossed out that the land outside the wall was now fully under the goddess's sway, and Aquino snapped in immediately, telling him to stop using that title. Zerl asked Aquino if she knew the one true deity of this world was the goddess Ashia, and Aquino nodded. Everything in this world called her the goddess. Then Zerl leaned in and explained that Ashia's shadow is so powerful the Grand Ale Kingdom runs on matriarchy, with every single ruler on the throne being a woman. He kept talking, saying those people carried out sacred rites and bowed to Ashia because she was born of divine blood. And as Aquino listened with rapt attention, that idea suddenly didn't feel weird to him anymore. He stared at him and realized that a creature like this existing at all felt like pure miracle. And even the fact that gender was being treated differently here didn't even bother him. He leaned in as Zurl, eyes bright, grin wide, practically mocking, spoke about Grandel's people and their so-called heroes, and laughed at the idea that anyone with abilities like theirs could be banished over what he called a trivial slip, all while the keynotes in Zurl's tone and demeanor spilled the real truth. Deep, burning resentment toward Grandel. While Tamaki happily munched a snack, she asked where Grandel stood right now, then said that a month ago the prince got banished, and even though other heroes begged for help, Grandel snapped back with a flat no, locking up its own heroes and hoarding them inside its borders. As the talk dragged on, Zurl snapped his attention to Aquino and asked if Grandel had him worried. Aquino just shot back a half-hearted grunt. Hamaki, flanked by her smiling crew, waved them over and demanded to know why they were stuck in this mess. Then Zerl leaned in and promised that, if Aquino wanted, his people would dig into Grandel's situation, and Aquino snapped back with a grateful, "Yes, please." He stared at Zerl, suspicion crackling in his eyes, and wondered if that sudden generosity was hiding a trap. With a knowing grin, Zerl flat-out claimed that Aquino was the most beloved hero in the last few hundred years of history, and Aquino couldn't believe it. Zerl broke it down and told Aquino the brutal truth. No one actually wanted the Demon King to die. He said the never-ending war was basically an economic powerhouse, and if the Demon King vanished overnight, nations that sold war gear would get hit with mass unemployment, spark a global crash, and shove countless people straight into poverty. And Aquino just stood there, shell-shocked. Aquino chewed on Zurl's words, realizing an economic collapse could kill more people than the Demon King ever could with raw power. Then he fired back with one sharp question. Was Grandel's refusal to help other nations just a cold strategy to guard its own political grip and royal throne? Zurl doubled down, claiming the world's food crisis could be wiped out by the prince alone, because he could conjure infinite matter out of thin air. She basically called him a living, goddess-level miracle, and Aquino's eyes snapped wide with raw disbelief. Aquino's jaw dropped at the idea that he could conjure infinite food and goods, and he couldn't wrap his head around how Zerl even knew that. With a smug little smirk, Zerl spilled the truth. He'd been keeping watch on Aquino and his crew non-stop, 24 hours a day. Then he went even further, saying the convenience store itself had just appeared out of nowhere one day, and he already knew how it worked, even though Aquino had only ever talked about those details with Tina. And the moment it hit, Aquino recoiled as a brutal, icy realization sank in about just how deep Zerl's knowledge and surveillance really ran. Zurl caught him off guard with a sharp truth. This keynote could churn out an endless stash of goods from a convenience store, which made him insanely valuable, and then Zurl warned him. If someone that perceptive ever flips to the enemy side, you're looking at real, terrifying trouble. Zurl shot him a quick reassurance, promising he'd never poke into Aquino's secrets again. Then he pushed a sharper goal. Keep a strong trading line because Aquino was worth more to him than any demon slayer out there. Aquino finally exhaled, realizing that deal would help him just as much. With a sharp nod, Zerl thanked Aquino and promised to lean on him. Then he laid out the plan. He was going to track down Grandel and Tina's father's every move. "You take care of today's orders," he ordered, and Aquino, no questions asked, geared up to start right away. He slumped into his chair at the computer and hammered the keyboard, flying through every new order like it was his mission. As he kept working, a sharp knock slammed through the store like a warning bell, so he froze mid-task. Could it be someone outside the wall? Then he shook it off fast because that idea was about as believable as a miracle. He shot up from his seat and strode for the entrance as the knocking thundered louder and louder, and a sickening realization hit him. Those sounds were coming from the convenience store's front door. Could it be Tina's father? Maybe, but Zurl was supposed to be dealing with Grandin, so this didn't add up. The moment he swung the door open, his eyes went huge with shock, because Tina stood right there, just as stunned to see him, and her voice hit his ears so fast that disbelief crashed over him immediately. Tears shimmered in Tina's eyes as she barreled forward and wrapped him in a tight embrace, blurting how long it had been and how insanely happy she was to have him back, while he froze for a second, stunned by her sudden, overflowing emotion. He pulled her into his arms, and a rush of strange reality and bittersweet nostalgia crashed over him the moment he felt her there. Kaido clutched Tina close, feeling her warmth steady his heart, and he couldn't stop wondering. Did Tina really have feelings for him, or was her affection just an act? Yet when he pulled her into his embrace, Tina squirmed and shoved him back, cheeks blazing with pure embarrassment, and Kaido just sat there thinking she was just as skittish as his pet cat, Mimi, who stared at them with wide, curious eyes, because he knew if they kept this up, the whole moment would turn painfully awkward. Seconds later, they stood awkwardly apart. Kaido's face lit up with pure reunion joy, but he still couldn't wrap his head around how Tina even found his place in a city this huge, while Tina stayed flustered and just nodded along with his words. She told him she'd begged the advisor to track him down, and boom, he'd found his shop fast, and it was thriving like crazy. Tina chimed in that she'd been locked in the palace and banned from leaving, but honestly, she'd never regretted breaking that rule for a second. Kaido finally understood what was going on. Kaido's face went grim, and he said it. He was the one who had to apologize, admitting he'd been exiled from Grandel and that he hadn't been totally honest about what really happened. Asfina leaned in, eyes turning gentle as she took in his confession. He was completely stunned when she flat out said he didn't need to apologize. Athena slammed Grandel for banishing such a legendary hero, and she just knew the city was already choking on regret for that doomed choice. Outside the convenience store, judgment finally dropped the truth. People had been lining up since noon, hunting for Kaido. So Kaido snapped with shock and practically demanded Hive explained it sooner. Yep, right outside, a huge crowd packed in, grinning like they couldn't wait to see Kaido. Tina beamed and practically announced, "This is how you'll become the hero of this country." Kaido stumbled, flustered, and shouted that his convenience store had nothing for them. Tina just waved it off like it didn't matter at all, insisting it was no problem. He went slack-jawed when Tina planted her flag of conviction and called him the real hero, far stronger than anyone else, and her words hit like the same praise his advisor once delivered, that he was the greatest hero history had ever seen. She pressed on, flexing her skills as a merchant's daughter and standing her ground with total confidence in her judgment, and he only gave a quiet nod, still taking in the weight of her beliefs. Moments later, she dropped to her knees in front of him and doubled down, insisting with full conviction that he was the real hero. She then told him he'd saved her life, crowned him the coolest hero alive, and when those words hit, he blushed hard, completely flustered and visibly shook. Even with her heartfelt words hitting him hard, he still tried to argue, claiming he was a worthless hero since he couldn't fight monsters. And then Tina shut that self-pity down, refusing to let it stand. Athena smiled softly and took his hands in hers, telling him that even if he couldn't fight, he still held infinite power to save countless lives, and begging him to be proud of that one-of-a-kind gift. He thanked her, and that heavy weight crushing his chest finally eased, yet his cheeks stayed blazing red. She leaned in, yanked him in closer, and clamped his hands in hers. Then she swore, no matter what the future tried to throw at them, she'd always stay right by his side, and he snapped into a shocked gasp. As she shut her eyes and a soft smile curled her lips, he went totally flustered. Sweat popped up on his brow like he couldn't breathe, and he couldn't stop wondering if her move meant what he feared. Suddenly, she lunged into him and wrapped him up tight, and it blindsided him completely. He yelped in shock, totally unprepared for that sudden burst of affection. He was still reeling from that sudden hug, cheeks burning with shock. Tina, meanwhile, leaned in and tapped her chin like she was thoroughly entertained by his total fluster, and he snapped himself back into shape fast, because break was almost over and customers were already lined up waiting for the store to open. Well, yeah, that earlier moment is behind them now because this store is packed. Kaido flashes that huge grin and greets every single customer, while Tina powerfully keeps the line moving without a hiccup, and together they turn the whole convenience store into pure non-stop chaos. As the first rush finally eased up, he spun toward Tina and told her thanks, real ones, and she just nodded, urging him to grab a breather while the customer line stayed calm, like she'd been watching his every need. He nodded, choosing a short break at last. Then Tina stepped in and offered to help him in the store, telling him her merchant father taught her the ropes, and that she planned to stay for good, and that long-term bombshell totally caught him off guard. Her radiant smile flared as she swore she'd stay and vowed to work hard. Then he caught himself thinking, I have to protect that smile. Her raw sincerity hit him like a lightning bolt. Suddenly he couldn't stop wondering if Tino was way more capable than he'd ever believed. Maybe even stronger than any other seasoned merchant he knew. He admitted it straight out, confidence flooding his voice as he pointed to her skill with his store and her solid trustworthiness. Tina lit up and told him she already knew everything about him, so he should just relax. But in his head he corrected her fast, because she didn't mean asterisk him as a whole asterisk, she meant his store. Still, a wild thought jolted through his head. Tina always called him Master, played the perfect maid, and even pointed out a mole on her back, and he slapped the idea away fast, even as Tina looked rattled by his intense stare. 2 months flew by fast, and the store stayed packed the whole time, proof that Tina kept fighting for it every day. He watched her at work and realized the business ran so smoothly because she was there, which meant he could finally eat in peace. He stretched with a deep, satisfied sigh, and this wave of relief crashed through him. Because in this new world, for the first time, he truly didn't feel alone. Tina got the news that night was already creeping in, and she needed to crash and rest. Then she lit up and chirped back a happy, got it, ready to do exactly that. Even after his push, she stayed planted at the computer, hammering in the day's sales data with non-stop focus. And from his bed he watched her work, stunned by how fast and sharp she was, thinking that if the store had internet, she'd be blasting it on social media in a heartbeat. Moments later, she reached out and snapped the light switch off, plunging the room into near darkness, then spun back around with a face that gave nothing away, like her mind was somewhere else. He snapped awake, jolted by a soft touch. There was Tina in a plain nightgown, perched on the edge of his bed with her hand on his leg, and his eyes went wide with shock and confusion. Then she sighed, looking mildly let down, and said today was another bust, until it hit him with a jolt. She wasn't talking about anything else as she meant her attempts to seduce him. She rushed out an apology, admitting she'd pushed too far, then he stayed in bed with his face buried, replaying just how close he'd come to stepping over the line. Tina didn't back down, though, and vowed to do better tomorrow. Tina kept the days rolling with jaw-dropping skill, running the store like a machine and staying on top of everything, while Kaido and Tina stayed on constant guard, fighting off threats and making sure the shop kept running smooth, day after day. Suddenly, a crisp chime rang out. Boom, the convenience store hero had leveled up. Kaido snapped his head around, baffled, like, wait, what did I do? He immediately clocked that the level-up chime only he could hear, then told Tina he'd duck into the office for a sec. Tina just nodded as he headed out. In the office, he stared at the mysterious level-up like it was a loaded gun, because nobody had hit him. No thieves, no monsters, and he hadn't snagged a single new piece of gear. It felt like a glitch, but he didn't wait. He decided to test his abilities right away. He checked his status screen and saw his convenience store hero level shoot up. New items, fresh gear, the whole haul. Then he stared, wondering if he could keep leveling without ever throwing down in combat, and a wild message popped up. The convenience store equipment could be customized in the real world, but the meaning behind it left him totally baffled. Then his focus snapped to a fresh target, a scouting drone, and without thinking, he fired it up by tapping a hidden panel in the store's floor. The drone tore out of the convenience store and shot upward so fast it practically punched into the clouds, and he stared in awe as it climbed to an insane height. He tapped into the drone's view to scan the whole area, stunned by what it could do. Then he spotted someone sprawled on the roof of his convenience store. He zoomed in with the drone, eyes popping wide as the screen proved it. Someone was really asleep on the roof. Suddenly, the figure on the roof, a young woman, burst through the convenience store's ceiling and dropped in like a meteor. He jerked back in pure shock, firing off questions about what she was doing there and why anyone from Grandel would show up like that. Tamaki popped in with a bright smile like her entrance was no big deal, then asked if he was okay, because he'd just crashed to the floor in shock. Still pinned to the floor, he couldn't believe it. Her sudden pop-in and that booming voice nearly blew his mind. Tamaki lounged on a shelf like she owned the place, then snapped that she was a secret agent and had tracked him down all the way for this. He stared up at her, totally stunned by the truth. Meanwhile, in some far-off land, two robed figures loomed on a stone wall. One demanded to know if the report they'd heard was really true, and the other nodded, confirming every bit of it. The first robed man stared out at the barren land under the moon's cold light and let out a heavy sigh, saying it wouldn't be long before everything erupted into chaos. Then, just below the ancient wall, a monster with blazing eyes roared a guttural growl. Tamaki flashes a confident grin and tells Kaido exactly how she pulled it off. After her hero training program leveled up, she unlocked Stealth Trace, a power that lets her slip through the city in an instant. Kaido's eyes widen, and he demands to know if she really made it through that deadly forest alone. Tamaki doesn't flinch. She admits it was her assassin ability, Stealth, that carried her. She winks and explains that Stealth lets her wipe herself off the map. So even when monsters come hunting, she can slip out clean, like she was never there. And Kaido, unimpressed, just shoots back that her reaction is way too thin for someone being hunted. Hamaki's flustered, and he blurts out that he should be way more shocked by her skills. Then he hypes up Stealth Trace, calling Stealth insanely cool, while Kaido just groans that his power did nothing heroic at all and only expanded the kinds of rice balls he can make, making the gap between them feel brutal. She keeps snapping at him for lacking drive, and Kaido, looking shaken, can't help but wonder if she can really just walk away from the hero program like that, praying the demon subjugation work won't fall apart without her. Tamaki leaned in and reassured him, "Don't worry, everything's going to run smooth, even without me." She pointed out a party built around Kaido was already forming and moving fast, and yet Kaido, still visibly tense, snapped back, "So you're really serious?" Later, Kaido corners a short-haired woman in the dark and demands what she knows about a Sanatsu. She snaps back that a Sanatsu was set to meet a man named Mizuki, but Mizuki got attacked and vanished, and that she was supposed to meet Akina too. Then Akina got left behind, and she's done staying in this town, so now she'll roam free, and she throws it back at Kaido. "You handle the rest." She blurts out, staring in shock, "Wait, what do you mean?" He jabs a finger at himself like, "Are you tracking asterisk me?" She turns away and waves it off, flat out saying she knows nothing about him, at least not until now. She fires off the question, "Are you really fine, roaming alone outside the Third Army's camp?" Then presses him about his powers. Kaido pauses like he's weighing every word and finally says he's heard all about her. A Reikawa assassin with dangerous skills. He fires back, asking if she's really not going to hunt down her Stealth Trace ability. Then she shuts it down flat, saying she can't use it because she doesn't have a base of operations. Still, she perks up and claims she knows merchants who might have heard something about a Sanatsu, and she'll go ask. Kaido exhales with relief, thanks her, then admits he's been worried sick about her, and makes it clear he wants every single kid from his class back safe in their original world. Tamaki, hanging on every word, breaks into a warm smile as his heart instantly recognizes just how badly he cares about their safety. She erupted into laughter, swearing to Kaido that everyone would come back safe. But Kaido shot back that her Stealth Trace power was worthless unless she had something that belonged to the target. So she flushed, clocked what he meant, and blurted out if he'd handed her anything. He stared at her, utterly baffled, while she nervously giggled and dodged his question about the ice. Seconds later, she spun away with a tiny smile tugging at her lips, clearly relieved he never spotted her little cat charm. Then he just kept staring, stuck in his thoughts. Meanwhile, in a buzzing convenience store, a young woman burst out from the back room, blurted non-stop apologies to Kaido and Tamaki for the missing sandwiches, and for completely missing when they arrived, and Kaido's eyes shot wide in pure shock at seeing her there so suddenly. Tamaki, just as stunned, pressed Kaido for the name of that adorable girl. Then it hit him. This was the first time they'd ever met. Tina, a young woman with a warm smile, introduced herself and told him she works at the convenience store, then slipped in that Kaido had been taking amazing care of her at night, like they share more than just space, before she bowed politely and asked for their kindness to keep going. Hamaki's face twisted in raw shock and crushing embarrassment, her mouth hanging open as a silent scream of disbelief ripped through her mind. Belief hit her hard, she finally processed it, and the truth clicked. Tina was just a store employee, and Kaido was helping her only because they were short on staff. A small smile crept back in as the shock started to fade. Kaido, frustrated to the bone, snapped at Tamaki that she should have figured it out from the very start. Yet Tamaki, still flustered, blurted that she could help too, until Tina cut in, firing off a question about her master. Tina told Kaido that once she started working, the staff shortage finally eased up, and the two of them could handle things no problem. Kaido agreed things had gotten way easier, but then a sharp, thoughtful look hit his face. When Tina suddenly met his eyes and called him Master, Kaido froze in full shock. Tamaki was clearly reeling after Tina casually called him Master, and he fumbled to save face. Saying Tamaki could be loud and kinda messy, but she wasn't a bad person at all. Yet Tina's sudden declaration left Tamaki wide-eyed, flustered, and completely stunned. He flipped the topic and fired off a question. Was Hamaki aware his convenience store had leveled up? Her face twisted into pure confusion as she stared at him. Moments later, Tamaki stepped inside, and her confusion snapped into pure, jaw-dropping shock. She burst into a gasp at the insane variety and top-tier quality of everything, especially the sandwiches, puddings, and melon bread, and straight up called it an ideal store, wondering how anything like this could exist in their own era. Kaido and Tina just watched, amused. Blinded by pure joy, she threw her arms around Kaido on the spot and declared she wanted to live in this amazing place forever, then gushed non-stop about how perfect the shop was, especially how potato, fries, and cola hit like a dream together. Tina watched with a flicker of shock, while Kaido looked completely rattled by the sudden hug. Still clinging to him, she giggled that she'd never run off from something this delightful. Kaido, still reeling, admitted she was seriously an interesting character, and Tina watched with a grin as Tamaki's bright, lively spirit lit up the whole moment. Turning to Tina, Kaido told her that even if Tamaki could be careless sometimes, he was still a real good soul, someone who genuinely cared about him. Tina's smile lit up as she nodded, thrilled at the idea of becoming friends with Tamaki, the hero from another world, calling it an absolute honor. With fresh fire burning in her chest, Tamaki vowed she'd go all in starting tomorrow, then flashed a confident peace sign like she owned the future. The next day rolled in, and the convenience store was already buzzing like always. Later, Tamaki, wiped out from hauling countless boxes, fussed that she could barely keep going and demanded a break, while Kaido, equally weighed down, looked just as drained. Then Tina, clutching a box of detergent, flashed a bright, cheerful grin like nothing could slow her down. Kaido and Tina stood at the counter when he clocked it. This day was oddly quiet, with way fewer customers than normal. Tina flicked her eyes to the clock and said it was time to shut down and rest, and Kaido agreed fast, until Tina dropped the bombshell that Master had one more customer waiting outside, and Kaido snapped his head up, stunned at the surprise. He stared in shock as Tina burst in, right beside her an elderly woman, and the woman introduced herself as Sozi Melty, the district chief of the Outer Wall district. Sozi laid out her mission in the administrative agency and said she couldn't wait to meet the folks from the Outer Wall district, and Kaido thanked her from the bottom of his heart for coming and treating them so kindly. Then she shifted her focus straight to Tina and Tamaki, asking about the two gorgeous young women. Tamaki stepped forward and introduced herself as a hero from another world, and Sozi's face lit up. She couldn't believe her district had two heroes standing there. Tina then stepped forward and introduced herself, saying Kaido had her under his wing, and he stared her down, wondering if her concern was really about what it meant to be a resident of the Outer Wall district. With a bright, warm smile, Sozi couldn't hide her joy as she finally met Tina. Everything she'd heard about her working for Kaido was real. Tina, cheeks warm with a blush, thanked Sozi and told him she couldn't believe she'd finally met the district chief. Then they locked eyes and shared a real, heartfelt moment. Sozi snapped her eyes back to Kaido and demanded to know why she'd come today. Because this wasn't just small talk, something big was on the line. She blurted out the real reason, telling him to get out of the convenience store right now because she was terrified for his safety, and Kaido's eyes snapped wide with total shock. He just stood there, stunned that Sozi was begging him to flee so urgently, while her words hit him like a delayed punch. Right then, Zuril, the so-called mysterious man, burst out of seemingly nowhere and blurted out his full agreement with Sozi's demand, while Kaido, Tina, and Tamaki all snapped into startled cries of shock. Zero burst in out of nowhere, and he just watched as the guy shot off a polite greeting. Meanwhile, Tina praised District Chief Sozi Melty for still looking so elegant, and even Sozi let out a soft, amused chuckle. Sozi Melty snapped that they were just mid-talk with Kaido when Zuril showed up, and Zuril immediately apologized for cutting in before insisting they pick up where they left off. Then she pushed her request to Kaido again, telling him straight up that if he wanted to stay safe and keep his convenience store intact, he had to evacuate for now. Kaido stared at her, totally thrown off, like, "Wait, are you really trying to protect me in my shop?" Sozi Melty finally spilled the grim truth. An ancient dragon named Catus was already living right there, buried in those mountains, and every 4 years it woke up, crawled down to feed, and was the primordial monster that birthed every demon alive today. He choked on a gasp, stunned beyond words when an ancient dragon suddenly became real, especially since he'd only just arrived in the Outer Wall district a few months ago. Right behind him, Zerl nodded and confirmed it was all true. Kaido, still shaking, snapped at Zerl. Why were they hauling fresh residents into the Outer Wall district when a monster like that was out there, and where were the safeguards? He pushed harder, demanding how the people living there hadn't all died yet. Zerl admitted that, yeah, they had temporary evacuation plans, but most residents chose money and health over leaving in full, so a total evacuation always fell apart. He kept digging for the logic, asking why anyone would let a monster like that run wild in Kadding at all. Couldn't there be a secret night order or some military force lurking behind the inner walls? With a set attack window, he pressed, why not just evacuate everyone to safety before it strikes? Tina leaned in and listened, her face tight with worry. Sozi Melty's hands clenched hard as she braced herself to deliver a devastating truth, her unseen face dripping with grief. She admitted the brutal truth. During Kadding's rampage, the inner walls were sealed tight for defense, no way to pull the outer wall residents to safety. Kaido just froze, staring in disbelief. Behind him, Tina, Tamaki, Riene, Zerl, and the advisor turned and walked off, the whole conversation hanging heavy in the air. Kaido staggered, the truth hitting him hard. After Kadding fell, the people beyond the outer wall were just told they were safe, with no real proof they were okay, and Sozi Melty, her eyes full of grief, stepped in and tore out a sincere apology to Kaido and the rest. He carefully took her hand, pressing comfort into the silence as the grim truth finally sank in. Sozi Melty kept the conversation rolling back to where it all started, admitting just how serious everything was, while Tina listened, and the worry in her face still wouldn't let up. She confirmed the intel was already in, and Kadding had finally awakened, sprinting toward them. Zero barked orders, and the outer wall residents got yanked into evacuation, because this was a last-ditch strike against the threat closing in. Tato, still stunned by the news, snapped at Sazimulti. Had the monster really gone quiet today? Sazimulti bowed with a heavy, sorrowful apology and warned that if they didn't move fast, Kadding would sweep the whole area by nightfall. Even with Kaido's dark warning hanging in the air, Sozi's face eased as she looked him in the eyes and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. She told him how the folks of the outer wall had been stuck in constant poverty, scraping through each day in misery, until he showed up, and with him came better lives and the smiles finally flooding back. Zarol stepped up, echoing Sozi's words, and swore he'd protect everyone who'd welcomed them with open arms. Then he told Kaido to evacuate first, promising that once Kadding took off, he'd come right back to this spot. Peido's face hardened like he'd already made up his mind, his eyes blazing with resolve, and he swore he couldn't just leave them behind, not when their enemy was a boss monster straight out of a game. Tina stood there beside him, worried to the core. He swung his gaze to Tina, face carved into seriousness, like he was begging her to understand and give him her approval. Kaido straightened up with fresh purpose and declared his choice, a determined grin blazing across his face. Zerl erupted with cheers, and Tina, watching that iron resolve, couldn't help but blush hard. Zerl's energy surged, and he barked orders to his subordinates to lock down every evacuation route. Then he snapped that he'd sprint straight to the convenience store to gear up for the battle about to hit. Battle time, Kaido's decision snapped into place, and with fierce conviction he declared that the convenience store hero would personally take down Kadding, the Earth Dragon. The others blinked in shock and then, surprise. A few even looked amused, while Zerl stared at him like that reckless audacity was weirdly, endearingly brave. Kaido's bold claim detonated like a bomb. Sazimulti, Tina, Tamaki, and even Zerl, plus the other hooded figure, froze in stunned disbelief, faces twisted as they stared straight at the nerve behind his pronouncement. He leaned in, eyes locked as Zerl spelled out Kadding, an absolute nightmare with 4 legs and enough power to smash through anything with sheer charges. Its whole body was sealed under a thick green shell, tough as stone, shielded by special fluid, and Zerl made it clear. This wasn't just dangerous, it was a brain power monster. He swore a sword swing wouldn't even leave a scratch, and then dropped the truth that Kadding is where the name Kadna came from, because now it's a wild beast, untouchable, impossible to capture. Even with Zerl's grim verdict hanging over them, the red-haired woman shot back with fearless confidence that they'd somehow bring it to heel. The blonde-haired woman didn't buy it. She demanded how they could possibly take down a creature Zerl called a perfect, nearly unstoppable dragon. Meanwhile, the protagonist fell silent, her mind racing with what that confidence really meant. He kept replaying everything in his head, admitting he still hadn't truly tested what he could do, but betting there was a way. Then he faced the group and said he wanted to repay the safe haven they'd carved out for him in the outer district, and for that, he'd need all of their help and full cooperation. He glanced at his companions and admitted he might be anything but trustworthy, then urged them to believe in him and throw their strength behind him. With raw strength still humming in the air, the blonde woman stepped up in an instant, laid a gentle hand on his arm, and swore she'd always be there for any hero who fought to protect others. She didn't just believe in him, she trusted him without wavering. The red-haired woman, just as fired up, blurted that she'd help too, reminding him of their promise to protect. She was absolutely going to step in and lend a hand. Sozi Melty, the old woman, finally spoke, owning the years she'd stood beside him, and said she wasn't like the others with some special power, but she could still help the injured in any way she could. He looked around at everyone, gratitude lighting up his face, and then he just said, "Everyone, thank you." Then he swung his gaze to Zuril, a wry grin tugging at his lips, and told him straight up that Zuril was a major client who'd been calling on him for a while, and that soon he'd need Zuril back too. Zuril gave a small smirk, like he'd already bought into that deal. With a steel stare, the protagonist grilled Zeril, asking if he'd teach him the strategy to take down Caddis, and Zeril locked eyes right back with a smug, confident grin, like he was already saying yes. Moments later, the mission gear was fully spinning. Then one of Zuril's men rushed up and shouted that everything was ready. The moment had come to light the signal flares. Zuril just stood there, eyes locked ahead, jaw set firm as the crew geared up to leave. The protagonist stepped up before the gathered crowd, thanked them for every ounce of effort, then barked, "Move, evacuate now," to anyone who was done, and the nods and acknowledgments that followed proved they got it. Allied forces locked in their positions as Tamaki flew a drone overhead, scanning the dead, empty land, while Zeril, Kaido, Tina, the advisor, Riene, Sozi, and Mimi watched every move, until Zeril finally snapped. Everything's set. Perfect. Perfect still, even after all that meticulous planning, doubt swallowed the protagonist whole, and he replayed every past win against weaker enemies. Realizing this time they were staring down a truly terrifying dragon, Caddis, and wondering if he could even bring him down, because one failure could drag everyone straight into disaster. While anxiety chewed up his thoughts, Tina stepped in with worried eyes, asked if he was okay, and when he confessed he was terrified, she shot back with total confidence, saying she and everyone else would follow him and they'd absolutely pull this off. Tina then leaned in and offered to bestow magic words on him, instantly lighting a spark of curiosity in his chest. She flashed him a soft, gentle smile and promised she'd never leave his side, no matter what, not even if he crossed the line, got hated by the world, or got left behind. So he didn't have to fear failing anymore. She wouldn't fold, her stare stayed locked on him, and she kept going, swearing she'd take all of him, no matter if he was sweet or scared. With a gentle smile, she asked if he felt a little more at peace now, and he gave a quiet yes. Right then, calm washed over him. He thanked Tina, admitting her words were truly the best magic, then clenched his fist like a promise, declaring he was done doubting and fully resolved to succeed. Tina's eyes lit up with warmth, and her gentle smile flashed like proof that her encouragement had hit its mark. She stood right beside the protagonist as a warning scream tore through the air. Caddis was here. Then the colossal beast burst up from the ground like a nightmare, shaking everything and smashing through with brutal force. She froze in pure shock as Caddis finally unleashed, this colossal beast ripping straight through the earth with its scaled body, while the protagonist just stared on, stunned, because its arrival was real. From the control room, Tamaki snapped her orders, "Deploy the drones, now," so the diversion could kick off, and she nodded like she was about to jump straight into the fight. With the drone roaring overhead, it snapped the creature's focus right onto them, and the protagonist stared at the massive Caddis, its size way bigger than he'd ever dared to imagine. Tamaki stayed calm, and from there, smiled with satisfaction at how perfectly the drone had baited the beast. Then he leaned in and reassured Tina, calming her fears about taking on someone that terrifying, insisting that it would probably all turn out fine. The protagonist, remembering how massive the beast was, admitted Caddis really was a giant, but he insisted they could survive its attacks, especially with the convenience store's defenses. Then he screamed for everyone to brace for impact. Moments later, Caddis slammed forward, its jaws roaring through the building and blasting debris everywhere, so the whole place shook violently. Then the protagonist and Tina got knocked back by the blast, barely scraping past the direct hit. He snapped back to his senses, sprinted over to Tina and Tamaki on the ground, and shouted, "Are you okay?" Tina said they were barely hanging on, while Tamaki stayed there but swore she was still ready to keep going. Then the protagonist geared up for the next step of their plan. Tamaki, Tina, and the protagonist locked eyes with fierce determination. Fear couldn't crack their resolve, even with danger breathing down their necks. With fresh fire in their bones, they surged ahead, our protagonist in front, shouldering a huge canister, straight for the creature's face. He yanked the fire extinguisher and blasted straight into Caddis, gaping maw, praying the smoke would choke it blind, while Tina behind him snapped. "I don't think that'll work, smoke won't be enough," but he already knew the truth. He had to hit the eyes, the only weakness it seemed to have. Tamaki pushed him to zero in their attack on Caddis' eyes and mouth, but Tina panicked. She just wanted to back off to safety. He looked down at the convenience store and realized its solid walls were built to take the monster's hits and keep the city beyond protected. He hurled the heavy canister with everything he had, winding up for a blow that would crush them, while Caddis thundered with rage, its massive bulk looming right over their heads. Tino stared on edge, and Tamaki stayed locked in, waiting for the perfect opening, teeth clenched. He couldn't wait one more second to swing. He struck, jaw set, and clung to the canister with everything he had. Because even if Caddis wore a brutal shell, he was sure its insides had to be breakable, and his whole mission was simple. Drive that monster back, even if it only bought him a moment. With fresh adrenaline pumping, he started chucking fire extinguishers, one after another, straight at the beast, and Caddis jerked back, stunned for a beat by the non-stop hits. He snapped his head toward Tina and Tamaki, and there they were, kneeling in the chaos of spent fire extinguishers scattered all over. Tina stared up at him like, "Why are we doing this?" And Tamaki looked just as stunned by his sudden shift in tactics. Reality hit him like a punch, his eyes snapped wide. Tina spotted Tamaki was missing and panicked, demanding where he'd gone. Down below, Tamaki tumbled into the convenience store, violently hurled back by Caddis' attack. His jaw locked tight, and a wave of fury and pure frustration crashed over him the moment he watched Tamaki hit the ground. He glared down at Caddis as it went on a brutal rampage through the convenience store, its massive body ripping the place apart. Inside, Tamaki lay still on the ground, and he choked out her name with pure, crushing anguish. A hulking, scaly beast with a jaw like a cave lunged in, and its strikes hit out of nowhere, while the young man froze in wide-eyed shock as it barreled straight toward a fighter who was already locked in combat. Right then, a long, razor-slim spear shot into the monster's upper jaw, punching through with shocking speed and pinpoint accuracy. The young man spun around, eyes wide with surprise and confusion, and there stood Tamaki, right behind him, beaming as she announced she'd pulled it off, her triumphant grin saying it all. She said she unleashed her assassin skill, smashing the monster's blind spot with everything she had, and right next to her, the blonde woman let out a huge wave of relief, because Tamaki was totally unharmed. The blonde-haired woman kept praising Tamaki as a real hero, and Tamaki swallowed her pride and asked to be even more useful, while the young man just watched the whole moment unfold. The monster let out one final, gut-wrenching roar of pain, then its massive body slammed to the ground, defeated at last, motionless beside the convenience store. Knowing the monster might come back to life any second, the young man snapped orders to Tamaki and the blonde woman to get back to the city. Right now, while the red-haired woman was already rappelling down the building's side, ready to obey the moment he said it. He flashed them a calm, reassuring smile, ordering the red-haired and blonde-haired women to let him handle everything. Yet the red-haired woman's worry didn't fade as she glanced back, urging him to be careful. That busted-up convenience store sat alone in the dead, empty wasteland, while a massive monster, finally defeated, lay crumpled nearby, and the young man stood right there, braced and ready for whatever hit him next. Still stuck on the dangling platform, the protagonist locked eyes with a giant catfish. Its once-broken tail was healing itself right in front of him, so he threw down a bold challenge and dared it to strike. He narrowed his eyes and fixed a grim stare as he made up his mind to drag the monster as close as he could. The cat launched forward like a missile, its huge body cutting through the air, and he screamed at it, pushing it closer, begging it to melt into the convenience store. The monster slammed into the earth, and its own brutal momentum drove it straight into the trap, while a victorious smirk tugged at his lips as he realized, yeah, his plan had actually worked. The cat was finally trapped, every ally he'd brought in pinned it down, and its struggle froze. And as he stared, he realized the truth about a convenience store in the first place. Its weird, shifting rules meant one tiny tremor, one wrong bump, could yank it straight into another dimension. A dimension still hung on that platform. He stared hard, realizing the trap hinged on one brutal detail. If the monster had been airborne, it would have been useless. Then it hit him. All the pieces of their plan finally clicked. Down below, the mysterious man won, and Tina and the others locked eyes, exchanging that exact look that meant their signal had landed. Hand in hand, the whole crew yanked the ropes as hard as they could, straining against the brutal weight of the hanging platform and every last bit of cargo. Rage flared in the caddis, and it lunged again, jaws snapping straight for the protagonist. He bolted away and shouted a defiant challenge, daring the monster to try him. Right as the monster's head loomed toward the convenience store, the protagonist, still flying from his leap, stared down with pure, razor-focused intensity. The convenience store detonated into a blinding burst of light and flying rubble, and the sheer shockwave blasted the protagonist through the air like a cannonball. The monstrous caddis, snared in the trap, slammed into the convenience store like a wrecking ball, blasting through the walls with a gut-churning crunch. Blood sprayed on impact as the whole place started to buckle. Kaido, Tina, advisor, Tamaki, and the mysterious man watched the disaster unfold, stunned by how brutally powerful the beast was. And the mysterious man said it plainly. Even a sword couldn't pierce something like this, because this wasn't just a monster. It was an ancient dragon with terrifying force. His eyes went wide with shock, but grim determination took the wheel as he realized. No matter how brutal that hit was, the caddis wasn't down yet. Indeed, the injured cat, half sunk in the rubble, groaned and tried to push itself back up again. He'd been flung clean out of the first blast, then slammed hard into a wooden crate, groaning on impact. Because yeah, the monster's toughness wasn't a surprise to him. This wasn't some dumb beast, it was an ancient drag. Dragon stood locked inside the crate, staring ahead with steel in his eyes, while his allies hung back in the distance. Then he swore that if they kept pushing the cat, he'd wipe the convenience store off the map again. Then with a thunderous roar, he exploded out of that crate, his resolve rock solid. He swore he'd wipe that convenience store off the map, no matter how many times he had to keep coming back to beat the monster. Monster! He surged straight at the caddis, his face twisted in a blazing scream as he swore the thing would regret everything with endless punishment. Then, right behind him, the convenience store tore open in yet another colossal explosion, swallowing the monster whole. Once again, the caddis got slammed by the blast, its massive body ripped apart by raw, brutal force. Then he was hurled through the chaos, a tiny figure lost against the ruins. As he hit the ground, wiped out and breathing hard, he blurted out if this time he'd finally made it. He stood in the wreckage, staring back at the gaping hole where the convenience store used to be, while the mysterious man, watching right alongside Kaido, Tina, the advisor, and Tamaki, voiced his worst fear. If the katas crawled out of that hole, they'd put everyone in serious danger. He snapped to attention, staring at his sudden weakness, heart pounding as his mind raced. Had his magic finally hit zero? Or was his weird, special bond to the convenience store quietly draining him from the inside out? He forced out a shaky laugh, trying to play off his crushing exhaustion like it was nothing more than not enough exercise. But the sweat on his brow and the grim pain on his face gave him away. Up high, perched on a towering vantage point, Zuril and his crew, Hooded, Tina, Kaido, the advisor, Riene, and Tamaki, stared down at the chaos below, weighing every move while worry gnaws at the edges of their plans. His legs finally gave out under the weight, and he stumbled forward, feet scraping the ground as he clawed at balance, only to fail. He rasped one last heartfelt word, "Everyone," and then his strength vanished, sending him pitching forward into the swallowing dark of unconsciousness. As he tumbled down, the blonde girl and the dark-haired girl screamed his name in sheer panic, while one apologetic thought flashed through his mind. "Sorry." Then his consciousness sank into a crushing void, and he couldn't help wondering what wild visions would crawl out of that deep, endless fall. Descent Canada got hit with a nightmare so vivid it felt real. A wrecked city burning to the ground, debris everywhere, flames licking the sky. Far-off screams for help tore through the air as towering monsters swallowed the streets, and then Tina and Tamaki, familiar faces, terrified and trapped in the chaos. Canada snapped awake, gasping, sweat running cold down his brow. His eyes snapped open, fear still screaming in his veins, as a voice boomed his name, Connecticut. Meanwhile, Tina and Tamaki, two faces he definitely knew, leaned into his line of sight, worry written all over them, and they shouted his name. Still trying to haul himself upright and failing, he snapped, confused and frantic, asking if everyone was okay and where Caddis had gone, while Tina calmly told him to breathe and warned him not to jump up too fast. Quickly, then she told her that Kanata had finally crushed Caddis, and Tina stared in awe at the giant, defeated monster. Her eyes sparkled with pure admiration as she declared, "Seriously, that's insanely amazing." In the middle of all that cheering chaos, the crowd roared as they celebrated Cadis's defeat by the goddess of the outer wall. And Kanata, Tina, and Tamaki were right there, while Tina practically burst with excitement. Kanata really did it. Days ago, the sun finally crept over the far-off mountain peaks, spilling its slow, lingering warmth across the horizon. Later, with the three standing shoulder to shoulder, Kanata realized they'd been courting disaster in that outer wall for ages. Tamaki only doubled down by declaring it. They'd truly won, crushing the ancient Earth Dragon caddies. Days later, Cadis was going full celebration. Banners flying, fireworks blazing, and the sky turning into a living painting. Everyone was singing praises for the goddess of the outer wall's huge win, while Tina and Tamaki kicked back and soaked up the chaos and joy. The celebration kept roaring as people from both inside and outside the wall surged together, clinking cups, trading blessings, and throwing their hearts into one unstoppable wave of joy. He couldn't sleep, his mind sprinted in circles. While the whole city partied, a nasty worry kept clawing at him. That goddess looked wrecked, like she'd slept for days in a convenience store, and then it hit hard. After beating Cadis, he'd earned 0 levels. He stood outside the convenience store, and a heavy sigh ripped out of his chest. Because once again, defeat didn't make him stronger. Beating that monstrous Cadis gave him nothing, not even a level up, just the same powerless truth staring back at him. His mind snapped back to his bed, racing over what his abilities really were. Did he mess up the convenience stores that powers it, or was the store itself the weak link? He obsessed over what made it thrive, staring at the mysterious rules that might let it level up, and he couldn't stop wishing some better gear would magically show up. Right when his thoughts were spiraling, Tina and Tamaki burst in wearing flower wreaths, and they hit him with a mountain of mouth-watering food, plus gifts from the grateful townspeople. Eat up, pushing him to bounce back, even though he was still blinking in a daze. Days later, Kanata was fully back on his feet, and right outside the convenience store a huge, cheerful guy named Zeril rolled up with a grin. He was all gratitude, yelling that because of what Kanata did, he'd struck it rich and couldn't thank him enough. In the loud, buzzing convenience store, Zeril stepped up to the goddess and insisted Tina and Tamaki, still clutching their wreaths, were the ones who'd get all the glory, and Kanata just watched, quietly pleased. Then Zeril spun to Kanata and asked if he could take every last bit of the Cadis monster's remains, and Kanata, smiling slightly, agreed without hesitation. Zeril and his crew wasted no time, tearing into the Cadis monster's valuables with pure excitement, praising Canada's name as they worked themselves to the bone. While Canada just watched, smirking, fully seeing the sharp merchant heart pushing every last one of them. Later, Kanata, Tina, Tamaki, and Zeril piled into a celebratory feast, and that table full of mouth-watering dishes hit like a victory lap. Kanata dug in, grinning, because he'd just realized this incredible meal was made from the materials Zeril pulled right from the Cadis monster. Their happy meal got shattered the moment a serious old noble and his attendant barged in, and the old man strode forward like he owned the room, calling himself a hero from the convenience store. Tina's breath caught as she realized, instantly, that he was her own father, and that shocking truth hit her so hard it left her speechless. Tina's father, the elder noble, gave Kanata a nod, then snapped his attention to Tina, praising her grit and claiming she worked circles around Kanata. Next, he locked eyes with Kanata and grilled him about the Sahara. Kanata's shock hit instantly, while Tina slipped in a small bow and confirmed, calmly, that he really was her father. Tina's father, this strict, icy noble, pulled the proposal right out of nowhere, slamming down a marriage contract between his daughter and Kanata, and the whole room went still as Kanata froze in shock. Tina's face burned with pure embarrassment, while Tamaki and the butler just stared, utterly dumbfounded. The noble barreled on with his surprise proposal, unshaken by everyone's reaction, while Tina gasped for air and begged him to stop messing with the customers. Please, no trouble now. And as Tamaki finally caught up to what just happened, she leaned toward Kanata and asked in a low voice if that man was really Tina's father. Kanata steadied himself and said calmly that it was no big deal, while everyone else was clearly falling apart. Tina, though, her spirits sank so hard Tamaki couldn't help blurting the question. Was her dad just worried about her after so long away from home? Tina's father, still stern, leaned in and admitted his biggest fear. He had 46 kids at home, and Tina was the 23rd. While Kanata and Tamaki stared at each other, utterly stunned, like their brains couldn't process the number. Moments later, the whole vibe snapped. Zero, dead serious, cut Kanata off and asked to talk in private, and Kanata immediately sensed something was wrong and pressed him. Zeril said the news of the Cadis defeat, blamed on that convenience store hero, had already blown through the town around Catena and was probably racing toward neighboring countries, and then he warned, if those reports hit Grandel, it could shake everything. As Zeril kept talking, he dropped the bombshell. The Grandel kingdom was finally moving. They'd stitched together a weird crew of 6, all led by a mysterious figure, and somehow they'd already conquered the Gazarin swamp. Kanata and Tamaki leaned in, stunned and worried. Kanata snapped to attention that the tutorial battle was finally done, because the whole world was suddenly reacting to the Caddis incident. And then Zeril dropped another jaw-dropping fact. A Swordmaster hero had wiped out the Lizerman swamp all by himself down south, and Kanata and Tina just froze, gaping in pure disbelief. Tamaki's eyes lit up as she burst out about how amazing the Swordmaster hero was, completely blown away by someone that powerful, while Zeril nodded, confirming the hero was being hailed as one of the strongest candidates to become a demon king general. Kanata's thoughts sprinted a mile a minute, trying to pin down who this Swordmaster hero could be, like some half-remembered FPS player flashing in his head, while Zeril watched every flicker of doubt and laid out his ask. He needed Kanata to help control the hero's skyrocketing fame, because if word of their exploits spread too far, it could spell trouble for the Grand Ale Kingdom. Kanata studied him with a thoughtful look, and Zeril just waited, ready for his answer. Beneath a cold, pale moon, one lone building hunched over the rough land, its windows pitch black against the night. He hunched in front of his computer, face set like stone, while a drone hovered outside, watching as armored riders on horseback swept in under the full moon, and he realized they'd shown up way earlier than anyone predicted. While he kept an eye on everything, he told them Zeril had just reported that the Grand Dale heroes were using a convenience store outside the city as a spot to scout. Then he demanded, "So do we leave the city?" Tina listened with her heart racing, because if Grand Dale's forces were hunting them, the city could get dragged into it too. Zeril stood there with Tina and Tamaki, reassuring them he wanted zero trouble for himself, especially now that Caddis's threat was finally gone. Tina was furious and heartbroken that they still couldn't get along with the city folks, even with the gates finally opened and trade flowing into the outer districts, because she truly believed the gap in wealth would have to start shrinking. Fanata admitted he'd already stashed supplies at the convenience store, planning to bolt for Grandel so the city couldn't be used again. Then Tina snapped that the people here could get taken hostage, but Fanata stayed cool and brushed it off, saying she didn't need to worry. Zeril then leaned in and told Kanata that even at a time like this, Grandel would probably dodge any scheme that would drag regular citizens into it. Then he pitched the idea. If they could just grease the guards in the outer districts, they might finally step away from the city's mess. Kanata let out a breath of relief and nodded. At the computer, Kanata watched cavalry barrels close in. Then it clicked. If he could just drag those charging knights long enough for Tina and Tamaki to reach the hill, he could take it from there, even though everyone else had shut his plan down hard. He kept his eyes on the massive pack of armored figures and the drone, realizing there wasn't a single Crucius or hero in sight. And that made him wonder if their only goal was to drag him to punishment, with zero chance to negotiate. Suddenly, a cloaked figure burst into view and unleashed a brutal magical attack, while several identical mages lurked right behind, ready to strike. As the cloaked mages kept blasting their spells, a brutal defensive barrier snapped into place and shimmered with raw power. Kanata stared at the spellwork up close, fireproof shutters woven into the barrier, and realized just how tough it was. Then he clocked the soldiers chasing them and knew the truth. They had no way to crack this kind of defense, and their tactics were clearly way too shallow. Even with the new barrier standing tall, the Grandel forces didn't slow down for a second. They slammed into the front with pure, unbreakable grit, sending a massive wall of armored soldiers charging forward, their numbers and synchronized push screaming just how unstoppable the kingdom's war machine really was. He couldn't stop staring at the relentless flood of enemies, his face hard with dread, as he cursed Grandel in his head, realizing that with numbers this monstrous, even a normal escape might be doomed or straight up impossible. He watched the knight try to smash into that reinforced entrance, but the soldiers, every move got swallowed up by the magical defenses. No matter how hard they fought, nothing broke. From his console, Kanata felt the weight of it all settle in, fully realizing just how dire things had become. Beneath a pale full moon glow, a wild, rugged world sprawled for miles, crushing forests, jagged snow-capped peaks, teasing just how vast and untamed everything was beyond the fight. While the real fight raged far away, Tina and Tamaki just watched from the distance, worry written all over their faces. Tina tried to steady her, insisting Kanata would be fine and reminding Tamaki that it was him who took down caddies, but Tamaki still couldn't shake the dread. A sudden ping jolted him. He'd leveled up. He realized all the exp he'd been racking up while the knights were beating him down just hit the threshold, and this was a make-or-break moment, so he had to confirm his brand-new abilities right now. He checked his freshly updated status, and a grin exploded across his face when he spotted the new items and skills. Then the joy vanished fast as confusion slammed in, because some of the upgrades were straight-up wild, like a legendary Dragon Slayer title and an open bento box that somehow kept multiplying. He stared at the shelves, thinking something had to be wrong. Drones and magic shutters didn't belong in a normal convenience store at all. So even with doubts clawing at him, he refused to freeze. It was time to grab these weird new acquisitions and put them to the test. His worst fears got confirmed when 2 Gatling shock cannons erupted onto the roof, barrels roaring to life. He just froze, stunned that something this brutal existed at all, while down below the Grandel soldiers kept charging forward, completely oblivious to the danger above. He stared at the fallen soldiers and clocked that they couldn't fight back. Then, with a single thought, he hit a brand new button on his control panel, and the whole convenience store building started spinning like it was alive. The building spun like a trap, and the attacking soldiers got caught flat-footed, faces first into the floor as they sprawled, while he smiled wide, gripping a Gatling gun, laughing at just how ridiculous it all was. The Grandel soldiers got yanked into chaos, stumbling, pitching over, and trying to stay upright as the whole building twisted and spun beneath them. Panic erupted as they shouted, baffled, demanding answers for what this structure even was, and why the intelligence they were given was so wildly wrong. He watched the chaos erupt, and one soldier shouted that their mission was life or death for Grandel. No matter what, they couldn't fail, and then his mind snapped to the name Drake, the first time he'd ever heard it. Then he slammed the control panel. Smoke-dispersing drones roared to life, flooding the battlefield with a brutal wall of fog, scrambling the last soldiers completely, and carving out the perfect escape route. Snatching his chance, he bolted out of the convenience store and vanished into the choking smoke, charging into the rocky terrain ahead, leaving the stunned soldiers staring after him. Barely escaping the chaos, he and his crew found themselves charging through a dense forest on horseback. Tina shouted to him as Tamaki rode up beside him, and Tamaki leaned in to talk straight to Zero. Kanata's eyes widened as Tamaki explained why she was there. She'd thought he'd already be ahead, but she needed to step in and use her skills again, while Zero leaned in and started giving Kanata solid advice. Zarol turned to Kanata and poured out his heartfelt gratitude, admitting just how much he owed him. Then Tamaki shoved Kanata to hurry, pushed him toward the horse, and helped him scramble up fast, right into the saddle. Right before they rode out, Zarol fired off one last heartfelt thank you for everything he'd been given, and Kanata shot back a warm thanks of his own, then asked Zarol to pass along his respect to everyone back in town. With that sly, knowing grin, Zarol promised they'd decross paths again if fate let them, and then Kanata, Tina, and Tamaki vanished into the forest on horseback. Beneath a cold, pale moon, Zarol stood alone in the quiet forest, staring at the trail where his companions disappeared, just one lone figure swallowed by the trees. In the glittering halls of the Grandel Kingdom, Kargensteiner, messenger of the Western Alliance, rushed to the Queen and spilled the news of his brutal trip from the West, explaining why he'd come at all, while the Queen sat rock-steady and pressed him for the real reason he was there. The Queen leaned in and declared that magic users were finally real, and she was ready to back them with everything her country had: people, supplies, the whole package. Then she barked a command that cut through the silence, rushing 10,000 troops to swell the expeditionary force, while her words rolled loud across the alert Grand Ale soldiers. Hargensteiner couldn't stop praising the Queen for that lightning-fast call to unleash such a huge force. Then he straight-up swore he'd stay rock-solid, promising he'd carry out his duty, fighting right at the Demon King's side. Then the Queen leaned in and asked if the heroes from another world would finally step into the war. After all this time, they still hadn't even joined. Kargan answered with a heavy sigh, saying their promise of total safety against the Demon King's army still hung in doubt. Kargensteiner, now seated, leaned in and told the Queen the heroes would get their shot to prove their real power soon, urging her to hang on just a little longer, his eyes locked steady as he spoke. He bowed low, and his mind instantly snapped to the Queen. She'd climbed onto the throne young, survived a bizarre illness that wiped out her parents, and her political genius was respected even in the West, yet somehow she still managed to be a pain in his side. A few moments later, now seated, he flashed her a reassuring smile and told her the truth. He was the one who had the immortal hero's power, summoned half a year ago. The queen listened, and her face snapped from calm to pure shock. He leaned in and spilled a secret the world still didn't know. Because the party of chosen heroes had already wiped out every goblin and lizard man nest in the east. With a smug, confident grin, he gestured like it was the most unstoppable victory ever, delivering the shocking news. The queen's eyes went wide with shock as the news hit. She marveled that the heroes had wiped out every last lizard man, and a small, pleased smile finally flickered across her lips. Once the debate finally died down, he bowed again in the grand throne room, thanked every soul watching, and declared that he could now bring a favorable report back to the three nations. Standing right beside the seated queen, he muttered that the time had finally come to file a progress report on the heroes to the Western Alliance, and she nodded along, though her eyes stayed far off. The queen spun toward him, a gentle, almost teasing smile curling her lips as her fingers brushed her face, and she promised everything would run smooth as long as he just listened to her, dropping the name Lord Kurasisu like she already knew. Then bam, the doors blew wide open and an elderly advisor lunged inside, panic carved into his face with his worried mate right on his heels. He shouted the news like it was burning his throat. The Kanbini heroes, heroes of the West Kadena Autonomous Region, had slain a legendary land dragon. The queen and Kargan froze in stunned disbelief. The queen's calm cracked wide open. Her eyes bulged with panic as she demanded answers. How could these heroes possibly drop a legendary land dragon when they were supposed to be dead? She snapped at the truth of every report, then ordered an immediate investigation into Kadena, convinced betrayal might be lurking in the shadows. Kargan watched the queen spiral into panic, and a smug little look flickered across his face. Inside his head, he scoffed that she had zero composure and no clue how to handle anyone who wasn't smiling on command. He faced the older man, who snarled that he'd tried to put the queen to sleep again. Only this time she'd been in a rotten mood. So Kargensteiner fired back, asking whether the intel they'd gotten earlier really was the truth. The old man nodded and swore the reports were true. Kadena's merchants were all talking about the Kanbini heroes. Then Kargensteiner leaned in, baffled, asking how they pulled off a feat like that when everyone kept saying they weren't even built for combat. Drake Gorin, the usurper himself, Prime Minister of the Grandel Kingdom, was finally exposed, secretly plotting to have Kyoraisu's parents assassinated so he could bend the young queen to his will. While that bombshell dropped, Kanata, Tina, and Tamaki huddled over the legendary land dragon, and Kanata admitted he had no clue what it really was, yet insisted Tamaki, vice chairman, could have beaten it. Tina snapped them into action. Confirm the truth, then haul it straight to the queen. He couldn't help but marvel at how the immortal hero was turning out to be wildly useful. He'd already dazzled the queen with advanced magic, and now everything was working out for both sides, all because of his killer appraisal skills and the magic that let him spot hidden powers the moment they were there. Then he grilled Kanata about why an assassin hero was tagging along, and Kanata shot back that he'd take care of it, shoving the Kanbini heroes aside as good for nothing and swearing he'd hunt down that girl and wipe her out. Kargensteiner nodded and slipped away, and Tamaki just stared after him, grim-faced, while Kanata turned his eyes the other way. As Tamaki turned to go, he shouted after him, demanding to know if Yukashiri was there. Tamaki spun around to face her, asking if her question was something he had no business bringing up here, and Tamaki answered that she'd only just arrived. She hadn't heard a thing yet. He brushed off her worry, snapping that Yukashiri just needed to cooperate more. Then he fired back, asking if they weren't comrades who were supposed to help each other. Tamaki's patience snapped too. She shot back that she didn't care about any of that. Tamaki's mind raced with her mission, to crush the Demon King and drag everyone back to their original world. And then she straight up asked Kargensteiner if his death would mess with her plans. He told her the truth. As chairman, his only priority was everyone's safety. And as he thought Tamaki was surprisingly kind, Tamaki returned the favor, telling herself she'd be fine. Hamaki snapped that she alone could bring down the Demon King, unlike everyone else, and Kargensteiner just gave a sly little smile. Then she fired back, saying that as a hero tied to this nation, his reckless moves left her uneasy, and he'd better tread carefully from here on out. The moment she said it, Kargensteiner looked completely stunned. She pushed the conversation with Kargensteiner, pressing him for the latest levels on the chosen Kanbini heroes. Most of them were sitting around level 3, already boosted past their old forms. Then Tamaki slipped in her own report. She was level 5, solo missions were hitting harder for her. And the moment she brought up the legendary Hell Dragon, the name alone sounded like it mattered. Her eyes lit up with pure thrill as she talked about the legendary Hell Dragon, so hooked on the idea she couldn't stop herself from begging to join, chasing that rush and the rewards. Then she spun to Kanata beside her and asked what his level was right now. As Tamaki left, flanked by Grandel's soldiers, she snapped one last glance over her shoulder, like she was already plotting the next move. While somewhere deeper in the castle, Tino strode alone down a long corridor, her face sharp with thought as she hunted for the one she needed. Her steps stayed steady, but her eyes betrayed her. There was concern, like a realization hit her, and the unease started creeping in. Tina almost immediately spotted the queen, right there with Kargensteiner, and she blurted out about her well-being. Then praised the Kanbini heroes, saying they'd been rewarded for everything they did. Kargensteiner watched their exchange with a sharp, knowing stare. Look, Hargensteiner gripped the queen as she looked shaken and lost. Then he calmly sliced the air with chilling certainty. The Kanbini heroes were just a meddling nuisance, colluding with the Demon King and throwing a wrench in his plans for the city. He kept twisting the knife, dangling lies in front of the dazed queen, telling her to crank up her charm level while promising he'd control her every move. Then flashed a sinister grin and declared he'd command her thoughts and actions for good. Imagine dying, in a pathetic way, like he wiped out with a nasty stumble, smacking your head and blacking out like it's some PC tutorial, then snapping awake. Up in the afterlife, he's dragged to the judgment stand. God is the only one who's real, perfect for crying your eyes out, venting your frustrations, then handing you the absolute worst reincarnation imaginable. Yeah, Konosuba kicks off exactly like that. A world that rips every sky cliché straight out of the rulebook, throws them into a blender, and spits out one of the most chaotic, laugh-out-loud anime tales that are so stupid on purpose they become genius. Today, we're diving headfirst into this whole universe. No hesitation, all hype. Where the protagonist is dropped down, face to the floor at last. That mage is locked to just one spell, nothing more. Yeah, Aqua is the goddess, and honestly, that single detail pretty much tells you everything you need to know. So get comfy, because the next part is about to hit hard. And kept making reckless, totally questionable choices that never works out, but somehow it always still ends up like this. And after ripping through every last bit of this glorious, heart-pounding chaos, all right, if you want the whole story of Konosuba from the very start to the final beat, linking everything together. Everything you need to get what's about to happen, so it finally makes. This bunch of useless idiots, man. Somehow he clung to life long enough. Enough to turn into legends, or at the very least, legends in the. At least everyone in the kingdom knows that joke. Kingdom, so if you're ready to laugh and dive into the pages. Live this story with me, stick around. Until the very end, he just kept pushing forward, no stopping. Because this video is the full ride through every Konosuba season, starting right with Season 1. So unbearably sad that it hits you on the one rare day you finally step out to. New game, today's the only day you've got. In that safe cave, you suddenly hear a truck coming. That truck is about to crush a girl in its path, right before she can even react. Died like a real hero, like a true alpha, but nah, because honestly, you got rattled and totally missed that the truck was right. Was actually a tractor crawling at just 2 km per hour, slow as molasses, and on top of that. And the wild part is, you didn't even die from the impact. You died from sheer shock, convinced a truck was about to hit you, like the moment you never even saw coming just slammed into your brain. That shit didn't even exist, and the shock hit so hard you couldn't help but piss yourself. Yeah, and the second they found you dead, they cracked up. The hospital doctors joined in, and even your own family laughed. And just to make it worse, the goddess who offered you cold, then you laughed at your own sad, miserable, disgraceful mess. Peaceful way of dying, and that's the like Kuma after he dying finally met the goddess Aqua, a blue-haired, thick-ass goddess who absolutely, because he told everyone he's totally into video games. A twisted game hands him a brutal gift, rebirth, right in the middle of it all. In this fantasy world, he doesn't just survive, he can power up and become unstoppable. A legendary adventurer surged forward and shattered every last hope, defeat. A king who doesn't just rule this world, he threatens to burn it all down. World, he'll go after anything he wants. She did it purely out of spite, just because she cackled at his death, then the next one showed up. Just when Aqua thinks she's safe, another goddess barges in to steal her job and take over. His wish, because Aqua won't be able to return at all unless she pulls it off. Crush the Demon King and snatch victory from the jaws of darkness. Another wish, and yeah, that's how the explosive first season of Konosuba The moment they step in, right away. In this fantasy world, because they had. They had zero cash, so they had to. He begged the old man for a loan and asked for cash too. They had to sign up as adventurers at the guild. That's when everything goes wrong, and Kuma's got nothing but low stats, like every number is stacked against him. Stats don't change, except intelligence and luck. Fighting is fucking pointless. Aqua, though, she's the total opposite of that. The total opposite, his intelligence and luck were both below average. Sprint into the unknown as adventurers. And Aqua slammed into a whole new rank, becoming an archpriest. To heal her allies, only for everything to go sideways and leave her stranded in the aftermath. Learning cheap party magic tricks like a total show-off. Alma dives into thief lessons, slipping into hiding spots for presents and sniffing out secrets with razor-sharp detection. Collecting enemies or stealing panties. What the hell, he's really out here snatching panties like it's no big deal. And that's how it all kicks off, two strangers suddenly becoming full-on adventurers. And on top of that, they're just useless, so they end up wasting everything. Chugging alcohol and then hitting the night dinner. Tuma finally snaps and tells this bullsh to get out of his life. With two more characters, unhinged lowly archmage, completely losing it. A winner takes all. Whoever can unleash the most powerful F***K wins. The offensive magic stronger than anything else. Then it's She levels up, and it starts guzzling power like crazy, more than she even has. So she can only use it once a day, and then it's gone. And then his body goes rigid, drops to the ground, and he's left completely frozen, unable to. Until the next day, so yeah, another. Just another worthless copy. I mean, yeah, totally not real. Seriously, she's the strongest of the bunch, and because she can only use it once a day, and after that, it just ends up feeling kind of useless. But over on the other side, there's the block. The noble's blonde daughter. A noble so close to the king that they practically shared the same shadow. But no one has a clue who she really is, so has it. She keeps pretending, so I'm begging you, make a change. Usually it's a blonde paladin named. It's unbelievably strong, standing his ground with a wall of defenses, and a justice so fierce it burned. But she's still pretty useless, because in combat she's a total disaster. With one deadly strike, then it gets even worse. He's into getting mistreated, beaten, and humiliated, like that's the whole point. And then it would say another Dunblint, yeah, but listen, this is That just dropped into our protagonist's lap, no warning, no chance to breathe. Who is it? It's WDWWDSWDWW. Because he's not great at fighting either, so right in the middle of their wild adventures, as adventurers who dive into wild adventures, and suddenly they collide with a bunch of unforgettable side characters. Like the wild, booming welcome from the Big Boob Guild. Receptionist basically shoves the whole plot into your hands like it's urgent. Right in your face, and then bam, it's Chris. Also had the skills to back it up, could do more than talk, and that's what made it terrifying. A bald guy who, every single time he doesn't let up when he meets the prodag. He just keeps coming, and the welcome turns into a full-on showdown. He got a front row seat to hell. Yeah, that Demon King, and it's just getting started. Dare you walk around as the Demon King, still hidden in a human skin? No, because truth is, wherever you go, you're stuck with the same thing. Wherever the prodag steps, the brothels follow right after him. Are giving off major red flags, even though I still think he's an character, and honestly, that's a hell of a plot waiting to blow up. Right at the very end of the anime, he starts. He feels like he's getting ready to crack open, just like an egg from pussy. I kept saying it every time I was right there, Kuma. I've been right there the whole time, and you never even clocked me. Welcome to hell. And then Kyovia shows up. Or Cayenne, yeah, I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, a real hero. Hero who, just like Kuma, got reincarnated into. It's all thanks to Aqua that it even got into this world. Sprinting in there with a ridiculously over-the-top presence. An absurdly overpowered magical sword that he chased that fame for years, becoming an adventurer everyone couldn't stop talking about. And snagged some adorable waifus as your ride-or-die companions. And when he realizes Kasuma is not only brought a goddess into this world, he also set several companions he uses for his own gain like a real pro. Got a solid Latin American boss, and on top of that, there's a rumor flying around that he's a full-blown professional panty thief, and he doesn't even hesitate to think. I don't even hesitate, I chow down, challenging him to a duel to settle it once and for all. Make the unstoppable power of a super. With a giant magical lotus sword, the prodag. One after stealing his sword, yeah, then he slammed him down and knocked him out, sold the sword, and vanished before anyone could stop him. And then he was gone for good. Tag might look hopeless at first glance, but trust me, he's not as useless as he pretends to be. And there are two more. Adventurers bond with the prototype and become friends. The Dust, who are the absolute worst in the entire world. I've got the influence part down, but I'll break it all down better later. Later, and last but not least, there's Whis, the dead, a rotting undead with a hell of a present. And trust me, I can already see you all waiting there right now. There, wait, what? Get your hands off her. Damn it, she's undead. Necrophilia, you sick fucks. This is happening on time. On top of all that, she's the Demon King herself, Jim. Generals, yeah, even though she's the M. He looks totally harmless, like the last person anyone should fear. Because she's never once harmed a soul. The truth is, Kuma and the crew, they kick off their missions, guns up, moving in fast, hunting down and killing, just like that. Cabbages and coma managers, somehow the weirdest crew you'll ever see, all tangled up in the strangest plan imaginable. To snag a fortune of one, they dump every last coin into drinks, pounding it down like there's no tomorrow. Holics then coughing up the cash to wipe out Aqua's debt, to wrestle control of their money, so they end up, until one of the Demon Kings finally steps in. Generals totally ease into the scene like they own the place, to live near the city, setting off chaos that leads to, so it can end those low-level quads for good. Quests gone wrong, because every monster out there comes for them like it's their job. Find shelter with him, so Aqua has. He's got no choice but to kick things off. Darn, he starts working, then bam, he goes. Storms off to train and starts cooing, like nothing in the world can stop him. Kuma's board only has the option to team up with Mega, because afterward he had to haul her around himself. She's stuck in place because she can't move, and she trained hard, drilling her skills against a dead, abandoned crowdcast until it felt like it might explode. Every single day he climbs the castle, no matter what. It didn't matter, whether he failed or not, none of it changed a thing. It was bright and sunny, until the sky cracked and the rain hit, and it just kept getting worse if it was raining, if the world was crumbling, and the sky felt like it was about to drop. Didn't see it coming until everything changed. One of the Demon King's generals was already staying right in that castle. No head on his shoulders, just pure menace. Crossed paths with her, and he'd throw his own. She shoved her head between her legs, just to peek up at her skull. Skirt, yeah, this dude is a total mega creep. Creep was already fed up. His patience snapped while his castle kept getting hammered by bombs for City to complain, and Megumin, acting like the absolute best kind of troublemaker. Good responsible mage stepped forward and said she was the one who was holding the cat's leash. He stormed the castle to train his magic. Bertia was fuming, and he tried to curse her to die in 7 days. Wait, oh no, did he jump? He stared at her and then snatched the Vertius leaned in and promised that if they truly wanted to, he'd make it happen. Friend, they should rush over and come to his. He steps out of the shadows to stand his ground, and then the rich idiot finally realizes he's about to get hit with reality. An idiot blew it right after he walked out. Then Aqua slammed him clean with her purification spell. Right as the moment hit, she purified him with, and they carried on with their lives like nothing had ever exploded. Happened, and then they grabbed a wild miss. A mission to purify an entire lake, every last drop. Teeming with massive crocodiles, where Aqua just dives in and spins up a storm. Spent 7 brutal hours straight just not, and kept purifying non-stop, like it would never ever stop, every single step until the very end of that side of the cage where the crocodile. And yeah, she's pure, but it hit him so hard he got traumatized, like instantly, no joke. Fuck, time kept slipping by, and the headless nightmare came back, right in front of him again. Absolutely outraged, because it wasn't just one thing, it was every single one of them. Had they not rushed to the castle to stand before him, but in his gut, he was convinced they just left Darns to die, because he didn't even realize the curse had already been shattered. Broken, and when he finally learned the truth, humiliation hit him like a punch to the gut. Humiliated to his core, he kicked off the epic showdown. An insane explosion, a bath of holy water washed over him, and the transformation began, fast and furious, like the universe just flipped the switch. A ball tore away with the other adventurers. Ended up being, thus crushing one of the demons, and King's generals. It didn't just make them famous, it blew the doors off and kept the crowd talking for days among adventurers, and earned it the hard way too. A fortune, 300 million coins, stacked like destiny itself. They didn't even get a second to enjoy it before everything crashed down. Because with all the chaos exploding mid-fight, they tore the city wall down to rubble. The wall took the full brunt, every last debt crashing down on it. On them bleeding your wallet even worse than the cash they just raked in. So yeah, they were stuck in debt, and it wasn't going anywhere. And somehow that wasn't even the worst part. Winter slammed into town, and they were already in. They were freezing to death, so they had to finally afford a decent place to stay. They finally gave him what he needed, sleep. A deadly mission to wipe out the snowshoes. No tiny spirits at all. Totally harmless and effortless. Easy to take down, until you realize they're guarded by the General of Win. It's a samurai blade so ruthless it can slice through anything, anyone, no matter what. Yeah, our protagonist is finished for good. Died again and then boom, he reappeared right in front of. For Eris, the goddess who changes everything. Who plot to reincarnate him in Japan. Pan is the son of a mother. A multi-millionaire family, with enough money to light up the whole city. Family drenched in luxury with a stunning friend, but Aqua didn't go at all. She just vanished from the plan entirely. No way, resurrected him like it was nothing. He cornered him and threatened Eris, saying that if she wouldn't let Kuma return to that job. The other goddesses she summons move in with soft, unstoppable power. Then the prodag snapped back to life. Life like when you've glued the head back on a broken toy. He slapped it back on with superglue. Blue good is the new vibe. Then they rushed off to celebrate the protag. He fought his way back to life. They taken the snow spirit as a pet, and they accept. Took on yet another mission to hunt the haunting down and drive it out. Haunted Mansion is a mission where if you even hesitate, if they pulled it off, the mansion would be right where it needed to. The reward after he bolted through the corridors, scared to death, with no pause in sight, is barely holding it together, like he's about to wet himself. Aqua unleashed a brutal purge. She kicked every spirit out, and without them they all starved. Moved in and started living there. Remember when I told you about Kuma's adventure? And yeah, those so-called friends were a total bad influence. Kind that you can't even fully show, no matter how hard you try. Their men could demand any foul thing they wanted. Fetish, no matter how bizarre, still cancelable or whatever. No way it's not getting dropped. Or whether it was an act of justice or a crime, they'd still make it happen, every last promise fulfilled. While you slept, it played out in your dreams. Yeah, you know what I mean. Words, yeah, because it's a dream. There's no right or wrong problem here, because the protag's the one who's been running the show. A healthy guy gets asked for an adult woman with zero experience, thrown into it like she has no clue what she's doing. His sketchy little pervert stuff. At night, while he was in the bath, he ended up falling asleep, and when he snapped awake, Darn's got this idea stuck in his head. It's here, my moment is finally calling. He burst into calls, shouting her name like something was seriously wrong, and then, weird S slipped out of his mouth. Was playing in the background while the protag was. When they finally check what's really going on. Wait, then they realized they'd finally caught the succubus. Dream fetish, basically meaning. Nope, Darns weren't involved in anything that happened. Was a dream still the succubus bolted out of there, and being a ridiculously shameless bastard. Bastard now used that flimsy excuse that he was. Someone had his mind locked in a cage, and he couldn't even run. I couldn't remember a single thing. Yeah, not even you, babe. You believe that, right? But the real trouble came afterward, when the guild finally made its move. Hit the emergency button. A blaring alarm screams, warning that the destroyer is coming. Destroyer, this fortress with legs, marches in like a nightmare made of steel. That obliterates absolutes. Everything barreled toward the city. The sky shatters in a fiery burst, then the mountain erupts too. It looked like someone dumped *** loads of it ***. Enough to swallow *** an entire city *** whole. Blam, everything erupts, and then Kazuma. Obama and the crew weren't about to let the city. That was their home, and the next adventure was already waiting. There was one massive reason he couldn't afford to lose. He had to defend the city at any cost. Brothel, everyone showed up at once, packed the place, and waited for what came next. Darn and all the wild adventures that came after. Orbs from the machine's creator, captured and left powerless after it was forced to happen. He armed himself with a legendary weapon. His core stayed, but he finally lost control. Explode, but somehow nobody gets hurt. On something incredibly risky. But Kasuma put his full trust in them. They tore through space and teleported the crown right into their hands. Rounded out, then he transferred. Drenched itself in Aqua's power, channeling its energy. Thin knights from the capital rolled in like a sharp, hungry blade. Cold armor, ready for trouble. Capital burst in and said, the authorities suspected the Summa was behind the terror. Terrorism, because that crown demanded it all. Almost blew up it, tested it, and if it failed, they might have executed it. The execution is what ends it, so what's left for the second season to pick up? And yeah, there's this season. But before it all, there was still one more thing standing in the way. We're still in an OVA, and right now, bam, we're in. Where a rival wife steps in next, eyeing everything he has. The food for Megumin finally shows up. Reading was wrecked the moment it got undone. Dead Darn still spiraling into her masochist streak. Kuma stumbles on a chokehold, a cursed choker that could grant you one wild wish. But if that wish never came true, if they'd let it go, he'd end up dead by hanging. He snaps on the choker and then he endures days of brutal treatment. Treated like a king until the world snapped and everything changed. Right there. The choker won't budge at all, so he starts blurting out his words. Saying his goodbyes, he steals one last look before he's gone. He blurts out all the depraved secrets he's been hiding. But when it all ends, does it? Doesn't die because he refused to let that feeling win. Finally felt the calm he'd been chasing. He finally throws the door open, and then the punishment hits hard. Put it back on and send it to me again. Let's throw him away to die, so we can resurrect him right after. He went and built it all over again. And boom, the second season finally kicked off in full force. As the story crashes to a halt, he gets arrested. Executed, interrogated. With a magic lie detector that exposes every truth. Unmasks every single. But listen, Prusy isn't a terrorist. Still, they didn't back down, they wanted it badly. Until Darn finally spilled the reveal. A noble family steps in and offers to do it themselves. To do anything, a power-hungry feudal lord demands an exchange. Trading for Kasuma's freedom. Freedom because that guy is a total ing force of nature. Fat, sleazy piece of trash. And yanked her along with him, then Kasuma was finally freed. They unleash violence, and then they dump the debt for the... As the feudal's mansion crumbled, the damage chased him straight to his deathbed. Get that money paid up yet, and... A mountain of debt piling up, down to the government's doorstep. The government swooped in and seized everything they owned, leaving nothing behind. They pay up with their own possessions as the price. They tore right back into slaughtering giant. Slime coated him from head to toe. They finally burst through the door, tossed everything down, and rushed in to get her. Ended up sharing the bath with her. Yeah, and here's the kicker. Honestly, it all boiled down to one thing. They were brawling over who would be the one to. He dove in first, and somehow ended up taking a full second bath. Baiting each other first, then they darted off to invite. They stumbled onto an engine crawling with undead, and right in the middle was this undead mage. Mage Keel caught in the crushing grip of love. He teamed up with the queen of his era, and who, after pulling off something this huge, with the king's favor finally on the table, he demanded the king's wife. And the queen, sick of being treated like nothing, said yes without a second thought and bolted into the night with him. Straight after that, war detonated across the land, but somehow Keel and the queen still slipped through and escaped. And they actually start living together in pure, happy bliss. She died inside the dungeon, but he didn't, so he stayed locked in place, hunting the perfect moment for a priestess. Can purify him enough to show up, so he could finally get a shot at seeing his wife again. In another life, thanks to Aqua, this somehow happened, and in return he handed over his treasure to the group. He thrust them a treasure that was any debt because Aqua never even showed up to spin at all. Alcohol was right at the center of it all. Shun barged back in, guns blazing, and challenged him again. Megumin, yep, double trouble is about to hit. Min seized the opening to brag that she and Kasuma were so close they even bathed together, just to land the win. Win the match by cheating, because that other girl had never even been with a man before. With a man, Megumin scooped up a tiny Komasuak, for some twisted reason, only has pure hate for Aqua and for everything else. Everything felt normal, until Darn crashed in looking desperate because the Lord refused her, no matter what anyone tried to use as an excuse. I'm telling you, there's no dirty stuff at all. But he decided to set up a marriage between his son and to latch himself onto someone the king trusts. And just when it couldn't get any worse, Darn's father, I mean seriously. So she wouldn't come at us with non-stop questions. He stepped in to help and a wild thought hit him. Maybe she should just accept, because then he could ditch that blonde who can't land a single punch as his partner. Yeah, he only wanted to. To get rid of her, he leaned in, convinced her to accept, and he and Aqua headed to his servants, determined to pull off the plan. Aqua kept teasing the fifth, like she couldn't resist pulling it back for one more round. Fish Lalatino wouldn't back down, he just kept pushing forward. Stop being disrespectful to him, or don't bother talking to me at all. Didn't even want to get married, but after everything they'd been through, yeah, it all started to get to them. Mouth full of curses, then it all spiraled from there. And suddenly he didn't just like it anymore. He started craving to make it himself. Marry her until she flipped the script and dared him to a duel where, just like everyone predicted, she didn't manage to. She landed a single hit, but she couldn't help loving that rush. She got crushed again and again, but that only fueled her. She refused to stop and pushed onward. Take it anymore, and she even kept going, no backing down. Kasuma cut right to the chase. If she ever got married, it'd have to be to someone who. And he's got zero hesitation when it's time to play. Kasuma gets handed one twisted, unfinished mess of a situation, and it somehow spirals from there. It was brutally uncomfortable because Kasuma doused him, froze him solid, and stole his. The feudal lord finally understood that she flat-out refused to marry him. Lock it in once and for all. This turbo version would definitely crank things up to the max, right away. And just like that, the wedding got slammed shut, and Lalatino finally got to keep moving forward. You paladins sworn in under the name Darkness, have your next mission, wipe out the... Their mission was to rush back to Keels before time ran out. It feels like a dungeon, and that's when the purification hits. Certification circle, Aqua's at the head, blazing through the crowd. What he drew was so terrifying that it scared the monsters right out of the area. Yeah, just like that. Yeah, once again it was Ock's fault, so they tracked it down, and right there they found the problem. This guy, the Demon King, King General Vanir, who was itching to use. He turned the dungeon into a brutal gauntlet, forcing humans to face it, kill him, and finally end him for good. Die laughing, messing with humans just for the thrill. Humans, but the moment the darkness showed up, the whole plan collapsed. Thanks to Kuma's help. Ended up beating him, yeah, beating him for real. Feeding quotes because it wasn't the fight he crushed, it was the body that took the blow. He had the strings in his hands, and the truth beneath the shine was in. Mask that got possessed and turned deadly. Darkness's body, then the truth starts spilling out right there for everyone to hear. Telling her to stop fighting, because every second of resistance would only make her suffer. Of all people, he said, it had to be her. So she really couldn't ignore it, right? I mean her. Fought back the entire time because Spot Kuma didn't get a second. He made time to clean. Aquacircle leave the demon fueled by the goddess's magic. Humans unleashed explosions to finish the job. Vanir once and for all Kasuma. With the inspector watching as the witness, he slammed out the order, so he could blow everything up along the way. And with that mask in place, that's how both of them, the commander and Darkness, were wiped out. But then he raised his hand after Aqua's healing. Magic sealed the victory over the commander. They blasted Darkness back to life, and the protag had no idea what he'd unleashed. He wiped every last suspicion clean, even the one about the death. He clawed his way out of debt, and somehow turned it into a fortune. Meanwhile, Vanir took his final breath and was gone. But he somehow survived his mother's wrath. But he struck back again, and then he became. Vanir II stormed in and snatched. He used his own death as the ultimate way to escape it all, finally stopping the cycle. Ruling as the Demon King's general. And somehow that made him almost go harmless, like he was fighting to stay peaceful. He looked harmless, then bam, he teamed up with Wiz and started working at her shop, where he dropped down on one knee and proposed to the protagonist. Rolls up his sleeves and starts raking in cash by crafting his own creations. He didn't just step out of his world, he could asterisk, and that's exactly why. He peeked into minds and realized the prodag isn't what everyone thinks. Turns out the rumor's fake, and that's not even close to the truth. And that's how it all began, right when they kicked off that shocking first step into the story. In that world, a little business was cranking out products shipped straight from Japan. At the same time, the prodag, he rushed to the blacksmith, begging for brand new armor and a sword to match. A blade straight from the forge, because the blacksmith crafted a real Japanese sword. A razor-sharp Japanese katana in his grip, backed by super tough green armor that laughed at damage. But that armor was a brick on his body, so heavy he couldn't even move, and that katana stretched so long that he could. He plowed through everything, toppling it left and right as he moved, so he ditched the armor. Yeah, he was sure. And then Megumin shouted and named it Chonchai. On Shunru, because she believed it was. Meanwhile, that suspicious bald guy kept popping up wherever the protagonist went. Then, once he spotted the new sword. Sword dropped that line. I swear, I'm watching a brand new hero get born right in front of me like Witch. With the whole welcome to hell vibe in the mix, things started getting seriously, insanely weird. Damn it, this crew wouldn't stop taking jobs, like the time they had to handle those giant lizards in mating season go wild, and that's exactly when everything changes. From pure lust, he'd sprint to settle it fast. Whoever won decided who got the queen. Queen rampaged through the land, smashing everything in her path. He cooked up a flawless plan to wipe them all out, until it's... But honestly, it's not even worth getting into, because it's just too awkward. We're totally finished, everything's been destroyed. As usual, she even went and sent the prodag crashing straight onto his face. Neck and die again, look at that there raise. It brought him back to life again. But when he ran into Aris again, it hit him. She carried a calm so unmatched it made everyone else feel loud and shaky. But yeah, he totally fell headfirst for with a goddess, yeah, that's the vibe, or at least that's what it feels like. Nah, because once he got revived, he immediately found out that, while he was dead, Megumin had still scribbled, cutting down the legendary sacred sword, Excalibur. Days later, because Vanir offered him $1 million every single month for the prodag to hand out the products from. From his world, he and Aqua only kept going, totally brimming even more than before. Even when they never expecting the offer, convinced they were about to cash in big like millionaires. Millionaires who were practically drowning in cash decided to fork over the money for a trip to a city everyone raves about. It's famous for its hot springs on the way, every single time. Everything crashed down on us because of them. They got us chased hard with no escape. Ostriches with eagle heads that stomp and stare like they own the sky. Adamantium level hard. A man clenched the dark material tight, like it was burning in his hands. So yeah, made of it, and that's why they were. They tailed her right on her heels, while the prodag, like he'd yanked the carriage off course, and it shoved them straight into a dark cave. An ostrich is on the dinner table. Zombies wait, no undead. Then the undead burst out of nowhere. Aqua the goddess herself, tears streaming down, and everyone there. There are asterisk so asterisk many. So annoying, they're basically like a pyramid scheme that steals your memories, promising that if you join the religion, you're dick. Centimeters, yeah, that tiny waif's gonna, just wait. A Terranator, and don't you dare call it a lie. If you hit that subscribe button, it shoots up by 10 centimeters, the tip. Bottom line, that city is unbearable, like the pressure is choking him and he's got no chance to hold on. No one. I can't stand how insanely annoying they are. And I'm not just talking about Proto-Megam, this is way bigger than that. I'm not even going to touch the whole dark thing. So yeah, argument because I'm done before we go there. Since she came from a different cult, they lash out at her and strip her dignity in front of everyone. Voice, and I'm talking a whole lot more than that. The prodag just ran straight into the hottest spot. They were done with the city, straight up fed up with it. Aqua finally figured out what the hotspots were hiding. Quality and being. Completely clueless. King's doing. She was the real goddess Aqua. No fake, no myths, just the divine herself. Stepping into the world to lend a hand and make a difference. Nobody believed her, so they laughed and called her. He spat witch at her, and then it didn't stop, because it wasn't even a joke. Knight snarled with hate and vowed to burn her alive. Instead of just guessing, he dug in to figure out why. That's when the waters started turning worse and worse. Right then, they ucked up. Hot Springs guy, just wait, the thoughts hit hard. A witch who's also and they realized he wasn't just a normal guy, he was another D*. The other Demon King's general, Hands. A guy who transforms into a poisonous. It's a slime that swallows everything whole and melts right through it like it's nothing. But Aqua and the crew absolutely refused to let that happen, and thanks to the prodag's genius brain, who, even though it's nothing but pure cowardice, he's insanely sharp, he clocked at the moment when the bones don't what. So he hurled distractions at the giant slime, keeping it busy until realizing our prodags were. Life after one brutal vacation is a whole new kind of chaos, and that's exactly how the second season slams shut. But wait, don't you dare leave yet. I spotted you, and the OVA for this season hints that one day it'll all come together. After the prodag's ego starts to crash, go swelled to an absurd size. Thirdly, after he'd already crushed 3 generals. A so-called fan named Ranchosa. She finally blurted out that she's got a huge crush on him and can't stop admiring him. He's closing in on him, and then it hits, he starts bragging so hard that the reception starts to feel unbearable. It just bursts in out of nowhere and goes, hey, you long-haired, idiot-looking menace, listen up. Right now a mission slams into place. Stop this before it's too late. Hold up, there's a giant golem coming, and you're really going to stop it. Or are you gonna chicken out in front of the fans? So yeah, they basically forced the protag to head to to square off against a towering giant golem in a place like some ruins, except they weren't what they looked like. It wasn't a golem at all. It was a robot, and it had a serious crush on. Could brag to the fans again, like he'd just struck gold again and was rubbing it in. Proudly claiming he'd done all of it, and then some, right up until the reception. Christianist stormed back and said, "The loudest bragger has the least, so if you really want to, go on, approve everything, then grab another mission and tear into the ruins of that rope." Robot, and off the protag goes. Fan, I can't let them see me back down in front of the fan. In those crumbling ruins, he stumbled onto something that shouldn't have been there. Drop the robot below. This is where the action really starts, and it's all about to go down. Don't get it twisted, this belongs to a whole different Japan. A Japanese guy gets blindsided, then reincarnates into a whole new life. To forge something from nothing. The mission to smash through and defeat the... He was a king once, but time killed the thrill, and he still. And he dove straight into building robot women. Chasing the perfect one. He chased the perfect waifu deal, and it actually worked. He pulled it off. He pulled it off, then shut her away in a vault, but later, he just lost the spark and drifted away from it too. And then he tore into the next one, heading straight for another country to use his power to turn into a millionaire hired a real woman to feed his fetishes. And yeah, it was the exact same guy who built that destroyer right back in the first season. And as for the robot, the protag, twice about pulling off the act of pretending to be. Dive headfirst into his darkest desires, no breaks, no mercy. Fetishes, but the robot won. There was no escape, and they had to blast her sky high. Still the protag went on, straight ahead anyway. Stormed back to the guild to brag all over again. Even though he still hadn't done. Man, he pulled off some wild shit. By then, the fan already had his hands on it. Got fed up and bolted, since she wasn't even into it. Nothing at all. She was the girl they hired, the kind of person who slips into your world the moment you look away. The receptionist fired off that speech to light a fire under the protag and get him moving. Work, then the moment he found out, rage exploded in his head and slid right back into his same old routine of stealing panties and daring the world to look away. This movie is straight-up canon, so don't you dare skip it, got it? Legend of Crimson, with even more screw-ups from our protagonists, who with Megumin's one blast, everything that stood in the way got wiped clean, right down to the last. Every last fish in the lake was wiped out, no one left behind, and they were mortified when those other adventurers started complaining about it. And Kuma went even further, even more embarrassed, because he'd just earned himself a nasty reputation for women, but on that very day you will finally see what happens. Union stormed in out of nowhere and shouted that she'd won. He wanted a child with the product, and the way he was, the whole thing felt inevitable. He just took him in, no questions, no hesitation. Union was still lost in thought when a letter suddenly landed in her hands, and it said that the Demon King's army was crashing into the Crimson like a nightmare made real. And the demon's village, where she and Megumin ended up. Her skills have surged so fast that it feels like her father's death is the only thing left. Dai and the final survivor of the clan would have to go to the... He raced into the beginner town, hunting down the most you. Venture out there with absolutely nothing special to your name, just to make it happen. Bring a child into his life, because someday that kid will rise up, take revenge, and avenge the clan. By killing the Demon King. And that's why Union couldn't stop thinking about having a child with Kasuma, because he's the absolute worst. Yet somehow that letter was written by an old classmate named Rue. She's chasing her dream of becoming a writer, and that's why everything. So yeah, it was a straight-up lie, but Union bought it in seconds because she's sweet and a little bit goofy. Still, they couldn't shake the suspicion about that raid on the village could be about to strike right on their doorstep. So they had no choice. They begged Wise to teleport them right now. Everyone was there, but somehow they still ended up showing up. Him and them somehow managed to push through and go straight to the village right along the way. If they had figured out the way, they could have teleported. He teleported them straight there, yet somehow he didn't, but decided to ditch them halfway through. Instead, they burst into the wild and straight into a swarm of goblins, villains, and ogres sent straight from the Demon King. Megumin tried to bring the king's army down with her, to blast him with an explosion so he won't die. And demons, just as the craziest part, she just asterisk teleported in like nothing, straight up showed up out of nowhere. He snapped into action, told everyone the plan, and marched the whole group straight to the village. And there, you suddenly learn a bunch of wild new things. Megumin's family is forged into something incredible, starting with her. Stitched together by her father and her mother. And her little sister, Kamiko, are living in. So broke they're clawing at each other, fighting over the. Kuma set down the food he'd brought, now eat up water. Soggy rice every single day, and then they finally found out. Turns out the prodag was about to strike it rich. Got a sweet deal off the Van Air contract already. They welcomed him with open arms, sealing him as part of the family. Where the law finally crushed the mother. His mother slammed the door and locked him in the room with his enemy. With Megumin under the night sky. He stayed up all night, waiting to see if fate would finally pull the trigger. Did absolutely nothing, and then he bolted, slipping out through the window. Then it hits us, even though, despite being super skilled mages, the Crimson Demons almost tore it, almost. Never gets visitors because they're fucking weird, so just live normal, but introduce them. They dress up like Power Rangers, and the clothing shop owner swings a rifle like a clothesline, because he won't eat. Not even sure what it's for, then right on top of that, we finally meet. We run into Rue and Funifera. These two are absolutely fixated on the brothers. Apparently, he's straight up no good at anything. Union and Megumin and reveal, bam, the whole trio collides. Revealed that the Union wasn't even worth the hype. That good was coming in hot, because she was about. We couldn't tap into advanced magic, because the truth was way worse and it hit like a punch. Crimson Demons spend a huge chunk of their time just toying with that fate, right up until it snaps. Living their whole lives underpowered, never once leveling up their stats. Saving points so that once they learn it, only the power to level up those spells. One day, Megumin's sister got boxed in, surrounded from every side. Monsters closed in on every side, squeezing the life out of his escape. And Union paid the ultimate price. Dive into the intermediate stuff. These are the points you'll master next. Magic surged in and saved her just as Megumin didn't want much, she just craved XP. She threw herself out of the way, or that explosion would have ended her. Union didn't learn advanced magic because of what came next. One was a great friend, but Meg had other plans. Megumin was an absolute S******. She couldn't hit a note if her life depended on it. Sister, and that's why she's so grateful to the Union. But when they finally started heading back home, they heard a thunderous explosion and rushed to see what. Darkness surged, slamming into the Demon King's army like a war thunderstorm. Storming forward at the helm was a ruthless general named Sylvia, a fierce, hot-blooded, dark-haired woman who, the moment she learned, they'd wiped out even more generals, and the sight of everything around them hit like a wave. That night, so she barged in again, straight into his life. Raymond shot him a grateful nod, thanking him for letting her join their group. He called himself a great companion, and honestly, it looked like the perfect night was about to explode into something incredible. She was on her way, until Sylvia came barreling back with, stormed through the room, seething and snapping that they'd yanked him out of his night. Knight complained so much, so badly that he ended up bolting out with Sylvia by his side. He yanked him close and jammed his head between them. So the guy's basically a gigantic, shameless pervert. Herbert couldn't help himself, but he had no idea Sylvia was hiding a dark secret. A demon, but not. This thing is a chimera, a stitched-together creature, a being, forged from the essence of other beings. Did she finally admit that from the waist up, she was a woman? And the second Kasuma realized she was all man from the waist down, he instantly regretted looking. But it was already over, because she marched him into a building right by the village, where a magical weapon known as the Mage Killer was locked away, an insane weapon so deadly it ended lives the moment it struck. He cuts down mages with it, and Sylvia's desperate to get her hands on that weapon, to crush the mages and power up the Demon King's army. Yeah, the protag knows exactly what's coming. Swing the door wide open, right for him. When the code flipped into a video game command, and yeah, he only opened it because Sylvia wrapped him in her seduction. As he snapped, "You're just as good as a sucker," and the words hit like a blade. A succubus showed up, and he even tried to trap her inside, like he was locking her away for good. She huddled inside, convinced she'd never get to use it. Raise the weapon if you want, but he'd picked the wrong move and it cost him everything. Nope, Sylvia didn't miss. She unleashed her chimera. The entire village erupted into chaos as it got ripped apart, and it felt like there was no way, like the story just cut out mid. Ancient ruins that talked back, to take the fight straight at the anti-made. Anna and Megumin charged in, then vanished without a trace. Realized that everything was born from a single, mind-blowing creation. By the same wild-minded, that easygoing Japanese guy who made Unleash the Destroyer, a masochistic robot, and then right after the Crimson Demon. Demons themselves, because he's been genetically modifying humans from the inside out. Gave them those crimson red eyes and stuck them with that name because they kept cornering him, demanding a name, and it drove him up the wall. Then he finally spun the anti-mage web. People started calling him a natural enemy, and they demanded a weapon. Then he forged the ultimate weapon, his super shotgun, until the shot finally. A shop owner hangs clothes on it like a real clothesline, Kumo. Homo sprinted to grab the weapon, then blasted it full power. It with all of Megumin's explosive. Stomach and then he'd kill her, just kidding. She finally ran into Verdia in the chaos of Hong Kong. Massive as hell it looked, like a full-on League of Legends showdown. Aqua and the young, and they jumped in to help because they'll get wiped out, so they start. While the protag tried to think of a plan to deal with it fast. A shocking alternative to crushing Sylvie. It's already over, and the best move is. He cooked up a plan, he'd do just that. Sylvia had always been all along. She didn't want some empty comradeship. She craved real love, the kind that hits your heart for real. And somehow she couldn't resist, and it hooked her heart. He's got zero charm, none not a speck. So they tried to kidnap him again. From the very first second. The second he laid eyes on her, he knew he'd found her. His heart lit up. He couldn't stop staring at her radiant smile because he liked her and it showed. And just like that, she fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. It completely because all. By the time you reach that wish, you'll realize it's already too late. Every last drop of magical power. Of the villagers to force, Megumin and Union, things are about to get wild. Because Kasuma came back to, as always, and they come right back to they rode into the beginner town as absolute winners. Not this time, over yet again. Demon King General, and then Megumin fires the question that changes everything. Kasuma races to unlock even more advanced moves. She begged him to teach her magic spells, but the sentence just trails off like something terrifying cut her off. Guilt crushed her, all because she only knew once. That spell was locked to just once a day. Use it right or lose it forever. Today, but Kuma sensing the truth, realizing just how much destruction that explosion would unleash. Magic is her power-up, right when she needs it most. Or right as the next explosion ignites. Dude, this already looks like Season 3, so the story finally kicks off, and it can't stop from there. Protag, Kasuma is the one everything hinges on, and the story is just getting started. Is traumatized, remember silly. Sylvia, the movie's wild chimera. Movie, and she looked like an absolute bombshell. Burst in with a jaw-dropping surprise, because part of it just can't shut its thoughts off. He can't stop thinking about her, picturing her stride coming closer. He packaged it up, and everything else like that. He started acting totally weird, like. So he stormed over to ask,